One of the children actually called me Nana, and that made me feel comfortable. When he called me Nana, I thought, oh, he's not seeing me as a person above, he saw me as an equal, as his Nana. So it was nice.
I found Generation Wiser a very interesting experience. The children have been wonderful. I don't have grandchildren, and these are like my pseudo-grandchildren. I've enjoyed working with the kids, and they've been so well behaved, listened to what we say, and we've just done lots of things. And I'm hoping that the children have enjoyed it as well, because we've enjoyed doing it with them.
My name's Jackson and I'm 6 years old. I'm Mila Palmer and I'm 6. My name is Christopher and I'm 6 years old. I've been making animals and making some silly hats. They teach me how to tie really hard knots. I just like getting my hands messy. So now I'm moving around and around and around and around and around and around and around. And it's very fun. My favourite part is making the owls.
I've enjoyed every Tuesday that I've come in. It's like my second family. Yeah, it's very entertaining.
High gets the ball down towards pass surface.
5 games, Essendon needed to start well. Izzard found Mann on the burst.
You look up with those angel eyes. I remember what I'm fighting for. Oh, the victory cannot be denied.
Oh, I can remember back in the 60s I came down to Windy Hill with my father to watch Essendon and Richmond play football, and I can remember standing in the outer up on the hill and just surrounded by so many people I couldn't see a thing. You know, there were just people everywhere, and what I remember more than anything was just the tribal noises that came out of the crowd. It was just amazing, just amazing.
I remember as a kid, 16 years old, walking to the ground to watch the footy, and just the roar of the crowd and just the big crowd that it was, or were in those days. Always got the big crowds. Yeah, it's just always something that's always stayed in my memory, I guess.
I've got childhood memories of coming here, watching football and watching cricket. Like many other teenage sports kids in the area, I was able to play some junior football matches here as a kid.
It's the sporting hub of Essendon. You've got football, cricket, bowls, croquet, you've got the swimming pool, it's health and fitness.
Settle down a while. Tell me everything you're praying for. Oh, the answer will not be denied. No, the answer will not be denied. Every day when the sun rises.
But it's like an oasis in the suburbs.
I've been here for 140 years. It's certainly a space that's absolutely loved by our community.
Sport's such a fantastic part of any community, and it includes people from all sorts of backgrounds as well and brings them together. And for me, Windy Hill has always been the epicentre of that community spirit here in the municipality.
There's always something going on, there's always people on the oval, there's always activities. It's just a good place to be around.
Well, I think most of the members, most of the residents of Essendon don't realise what an asset they have here. And it's really, when you think about how many members there are in the croquet club, the bowls club, the cricket club, you know, there are really a lot of people using these facilities, but we've got space for more.
Hey everyone, I'm Isaiah and I'm so excited to be performing at this year's Moonee Valley Festival on Saturday the 30th of March. Come on down to the Maribyrnong River and help me celebrate this amazing community event. There's going to be some other artists and talent performing as well, so it's going to be a very fun day and we can't wait to see you all there.
See you there!
Hey guys, hit below to subscribe to the Moonee Valley City Council's YouTube page for all the latest updates and news.
To the ordinary meeting of Council for the 26th of March 2019, which is now officially open. A warm welcome to the members of the public gallery here tonight, as well as those watching from home. Thank you very much for joining us. As well as being live streamed, the recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that their presence may be recorded. And could I also ask that mobile phones please be switched to silent mode during the meeting. So firstly, on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, spirits and community members past and present. I would also like to extend this acknowledgement to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. Councillors, I have received apologies from Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Gachi-Marici and Councillor Sypek for tonight's meeting. Can I please have a motion that the apologies be noted?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Serace. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor, I don't know who else will first. Councillor Byrne. Thank you. Any questions regarding that? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Councillor Nation and Councillor Sypek have also sought leave of absence. Councillors, can I please have a mover and seconder that Councillor Nation be granted leave of absence from the 2nd of April 2019 to 25th of April 2019 inclusive, and Councillor Sypek be granted leave of absence from 26th of March 2019 to 23rd of April 2019 inclusive.
So moved.
Councillor Serace, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Byrne. Thank you. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday the 12th of March 2019 be confirmed? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Nation, thank you. Any questions regarding the minutes? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Nation?
Yes, Mayor. I have an indirect conflict of interest in item 14.1 for conflicting duty, for reasons disclosed to the CEO prior to the commencement of tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Any other councillor? No. Councillors, there was on the agenda a community presentation tonight to celebrate Cultural Diversity Week, but unfortunately due to illness this is unable to take place. But I would like to just say a few words about the recent tragic events in New Zealand. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I extend our deepest sympathy to the people of Christchurch and the victims of the 15th of March tragedy. Moonee Valley is home to people from all over our world, and this diversity adds great strength and vibrancy to our city. Racism and hate have no place in our communities and neighbourhoods, so we stand together with the people of Christchurch in support of communities who are tolerant, kind and compassionate, and we extend our hand of friendship from across the waters to offer our support. Like many cities and communities across the world, Moonee Valley has placed condolence books for members of the public to sign at our customer service centre here at Callaway Avenue, Flemington Community Centre and our 5 library sites until this Sunday the 31st of March. Following this, the signatures will be collected and sent for myself on behalf of Council to the Mayor of Christchurch, Councillor Leanne Dalziel. I'd like to just now call upon the Chamber to observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect to the victims of Christchurch. Thank you for your support. Before we conclude presentations, I would like to table this book that was actually launched today, which is from our group, the Moonee Valley Golden Age Women, and I believe some of the members of the group are here in our audience tonight. This book was funded through our community funding program, and we contributed $5,000 to the creation of this special bilingual book, which documents our Chinese community seniors' activities throughout the past 10 years in Flemington. And it aims to share the journey of the Chinese community within our wider community as a way of fostering connections as well as being an educational tool. So I thank Edith and everybody else associated with the group and congratulate them on this book launched today. So thank you. If councillors would like to have a look too, I'll leave it in the councillor office. So moving back to the agenda, petitions and joint letters. So councillors, we have received 2 petitions to be tabled tonight. The first petition has been received with 96 signatures requesting council considers restarting the Moonee Valley Park and Ride shuttle bus service. So councillors, can I please have a mover for this petition? Councillor Marshall.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. As you've noted, this is a request to restart the park and ride shuttle service that we were running from the Moonee Valley Racecourse. The reasons provided are that Moonee Valley Park and Ride shuttle bus service provided relief for workers in the area who relied on it, given the dearth of legal all-day parking options near the Moonee Ponds business precinct. The security it provides to people in terms of keeping their cars parked safely for the day, as well as their personal safety when returning to their cars after dark in winter, is invaluable. So, Mayor, I would like to move that Council resolves to 1, receive and note the petition, 2, refer this matter to the City Services and Strategic Projects area for investigation and reporting back to Council, and 3, advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Surace, thank you. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimously carried. The second petition has been received with 5,375 signatures on change.org, requesting the proposed paid parking spots along the boulevard, and in particular from the intersection of Holmes Road along the boulevard to the Orford Street intersection, be stopped. Councillors, can I please have a mover for this petition? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned, Council has received a change.org petition with 5,375 signatures requesting the proposed paid parking spots along the boulevard, and in particular from the intersection of Holmes Road along the boulevard to the Orford Street intersection, be stopped. The petition states that the decision to implement paid parking along the boulevard Moonee Ponds will have significant implications for local football, cricket, soccer and athletics competitions, and I note there is a notice of motion I'm raising later this evening in regards to that matter. So I move that Council resolves to 1, receive and note the petition, 2, refer this matter to the Director of Asset Planning and Strategic Projects for investigation and reporting back to Council, and 3, advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Marshall. Thank you. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? So all those in favour, Councillor Surace, sorry, I just should have read that names. Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, and all those against, Councillor Cusack. Thank you, that is carried. So we now come to public question time, and we have questions from 8 community members tonight. So I'll ask each community member to come to the lectern and read their question, or if there's more than one question, both questions. And I will then ask the relevant director or manager to provide a response. I remind residents that once the answer has been provided, there is no opportunity for further questions, comment or debate. Questions in order for tonight are, could I please invite Doug Stevens to the lectern?
And I raised these two questions in regards to the folly of the parking meters. I asked these questions in relation to the decision to implement paid parking in the boulevard, Moonee Ponds, on the basis of the Maribyrnong Park Football Club's correspondence dated to councillors and officers on March 11th of this year. Would council officers and or councillors please advise what, if any, consultation was held with residents, ratepayers, and or the sporting clubs who occupy the precinct to the impact such a decision will have on the various sporting clubs and their members. In particular, the football club that requires access to significant parking for their participants, both from Maribyrnong Park and clubs that come to use the park of weekends from 4:30 to 8:30 and on weekends from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on most Saturdays and Sundays during the winter season. That is question 1. Question 2, on the basis of the 5,000 plus individuals who have signed a change org petition currently lodged with council opposing this decision strongly and the impact it will have on our communities and our community's involvement in community sport, will councillors revoke this decision and arrange to have appropriate consultation with ratepayers and the stakeholders on alternatives that may be explored through a consultative process with all stakeholders concerned? Thank you, councillors.
Ask Ms. Reiter to answer your questions.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, thanks for your questions, Mr. Stevens. Council, in this instance, chose to inform the various stakeholders about the 6-month trial of the $1 per hour paid parking, which would not limit or reduce the number of available car parks available to the community. And we'll make a decision about paid parking further to Councillor Nation's notice of motion regarding the boulevard later this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Reiter. I shall now ask Ms. Rose Isa to come to the lectern, please.
Oh, terrific. Yeah, thank you. My name's Rose Isa. I'm from Travancore, and I have 2 questions. Would you like me to read them one at a time, or
one at a time would be great, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, I was told to stay away from the microphone. I obviously stayed too far away. Question 1 is, why has the location of the new Flemington Community Hub not been a topic for discussion with the Flemington Neighbourhood Advisory Group prior to a decision being made by officers?
Ms. Reiter, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. From an urban design perspective, the neighbourhood interface precinct of the 3 precincts identified down at Flemington is overwhelmingly the superior precinct in which to locate the hub. It provides a northerly aspect and terrific opportunities for optimising the hub's interaction with the park uses. So that strong rationale for siting the hub in that neighbourhood interface meant that all 3 concept options sit within that precinct. It wasn't a decision by officers, but rather a deduction made by the experts in the field regarding the best and appropriate response for the site.
And my second question is, if council isn't open to reconsidering facilities provided by the hub as specified in attachment C, or its location, again specified in attachment C, and if the $40 million budget only covers the hub component, not other sporting and park facilities, what aspects of the project will the community be able to contribute to through consultation beyond the look and design of the hub?
Ms. Reiter, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Council is absolutely open to responding to community feedback on the facilities provided in the hub. For anyone who's looking at the concepts at the moment, they all have the same central components, but that is completely open to feedback from the community about priorities. and also open to feedback about the 3 siting options within the neighbourhood interface, so they're sort of slightly different. So we're open to hearing about the non-hub aspects of the plan as well that's going to form the long-term plan for Debney's Park. So there's much more to talk about than the look and feel, and we would love to encourage everyone to have their say.
Thank you, Rose. Next up, could I call Jen and Jelly?
Only 2 questions to the council, really. Why we didn't receive an amended plan for as we were promised in the first consultation here? An amended plan. When we were there the first time, we told that we will receive an amended plan. We never have, at home I never got anything. And the second is, why we didn't receive a report an official report of the changes that has been done to the first plan, if any has been done. These are the 2 questions.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Writer to answer those questions too, please. Oh, Petrus.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. The first question relates to the amended plans that were to be submitted to Council. The applicant opted not to amend the plans formally. They did make some small adjustments to the plans, and those were lodged with Council. Those plans didn't trigger any additional advertising, and for that reason the neighbours and adjoining property owners weren't re-notified of the application. So that's why the amended plans were not distributed, because of the small nature of those amendments. The second question relates to the report, why the report wasn't submitted to the objectors. Council publishes the reports in the agenda on the Friday before the meeting, and that report includes all the applicants, the assessments from the officers, as well as the attachments that go with that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. I would now call upon Alison, Jen and Jelly to come to the lectern, please.
I'm Alison Gianangeli. My question number 1 is, at the consultation meeting held in November 2018, the developer agreed to consider colour-bond roofing after consultation with neighbouring residents. Why has this not been incorporated into the revised drawings? And my question number 2, excluding the 1 metre by 1.5 metre length of fence on the corner of the laneway for visibility, why has the height of the fence on the St Leonard's Road side of the property not been reduced to be consistent with the surrounding properties?
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Barry to answer those questions for you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your question, Alison. The first one in respect of the roofing. Officers are unaware that the permit applicant proposed colour-bond roofing. It was discussed at the consultation meeting but wasn't specifically proposed, and the notes from the consultation meeting do not reflect this undertaking either. Furthermore, the proposed tiled roof is generally consistent with the surrounding property and streetscape. The second question regarding the fence height, the 1.8 metre section of fencing within the St Lawrence Road provides appropriate screening to protect the amenity of the secluded private open space of proposed dwelling 4, which is directly adjacent to that road, and this is generally consistent with developments on corner sites that we find in Moonee Valley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barry. I'd now like to call Peter Linky to come to the lectern, please.
Thank you. My name's Peter Link. My question is in regard to the proposed development of 1 St Leonard's Road, Asker Vale, which is before Council tonight. The Council Planning Scheme Clause 5502, Standard B6, says when there is a corner site, the setback should be the same as the abutting dwelling, or 9 metres, whichever is the lesser. Number 3 St Leonard's Road has a setback of approximately 5.9 metres. Dwelling 4 of the proposal for number 1 St Leonard's Road has a setback of approximately 2 metres. How is this consistent with Council's planning scheme and in accord with Council's neighbourhood character study, Garden Suburban Precinct 4, which says that loss of consistent side and front setbacks should be avoided? In regard to the proposed development at number 1 St Leonard's Road, Asker Vale, which is before Council tonight, the Council report indicates that the developer should be exempted from having to meet minimum setback requirements, which will impact the properties to the south and west. Why does the Council think it is acceptable to not meet the minimum standards relating to overshadowing and also open space requirements for dwelling 4?
Thank you. I shall ask Mr Barry to respond to those questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Peter, thank you for your questions. The clause in the planning scheme on street setbacks requires a front setback to the crescent of at least 0.94 metres, which is consistent with the adjoining property to the south. As dwelling 4 fronts the crescent, the setback to that side street, being St Leonard's Road, is required to be 2 metres, and the proposed development fully complies with this standard. The second question, the siting and the massing of the development is consistent with a pattern of development which has occurred in the immediate and the wider area and is responsive to its site context. In particular, the spacing of the dwellings are consistent with the adjoining properties to the south and the opposite side of St Leonard's Road. The setbacks of the dwellings from both street frontages maintain the setback rhythm in the streetscapes, and the attached nature of the development is appropriate in this instant as it maintains the existing built form in this section of the crescent and the wider area, and that includes numerous terraced forms. And then there was also a question regarding the side and rear setbacks. Council officers consider the variation of the side and rear setbacks clause to be acceptable in this instance due to the laneway abuttal to the west and the location of areas of non-compliance being located away from sensitive areas to the south. And then the point or the question about overshadowing. The proposed development complies with the overshadowing standard. This standard seeks to ensure that buildings do not significantly overshadow existing private open space. The private open space area of the adjoining property to the south maintains at least 5 hours of sunlight in accordance with this standard and is overshadowed only from 3 p.m. Dwelling 4 is provided with 60 of the proposed development is provided with 60 square metres of private open space, inclusive of an area of secluded private open space of 25 square metres. And this provision fully complies with the private open space requirement in the planning scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Barry. Could I please now call upon Ruth Spielman to come to the lectern?
In regard to the proposed development at 1 St Leonard's Road, Asker Vale, which is before Council tonight, the plans show that dwelling 4 faces St Leonard's Road. There is a 1.8 metre paling fence partway along St Leonard's Road. Firstly, how does it meet clause 55.02 standard B5 of Council's planning scheme, which has an objective of development integrating with the street and that high fencing in front of developments should be avoided if practicable? And secondly, how does a 1.8 metre fence meet the planning scheme decision guidelines which require the responsible authority to consider any relevant neighbourhood character, objective, policy or statement and the design response?
Thank you, Mr Barry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and once again, thanks for the question, Ruth. The proposed development is consistent with the clause in the scheme guiding street in the scheme guiding streets in at least the following 3 ways. Vehicular access is confined to the laneway. along the western boundary, and pedestrian access is located to the crescent. Secondly, the development has been directed towards the crescent, maintaining the streetscape rhythm set by the adjoining terrace dwellings to the south and maintained on the northern side of St. Leonard's Road. And then thirdly, front fencing has been limited to 1.2 metres within the crescent frontage and only increases to 1.8 metres within St. Leonard's Road. This provides practical and appropriate privacy to the secluded private open space of dwelling 4. This section of fence is limited in length and is consistent with developments on corner sites. The second question, the side fence to dwelling 4 within St. Leonard's Road, the St. Leonard's Road frontage, while 1.8 metres in height, is appropriate in this instance, we believe, as it abuts the secluded private open space of that dwelling. Once again, we regard this as consistent with this form of development on a corner site. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can I now please call upon Mena and Anthony Sciutu? Sciutu? Sorry if I haven't pronounced that correctly.
Thanks, councillors. My name's Anthony Sciutu, 3 St Leonard's Road, Ascot Vale. First question, in relation to the proposed development at 1 St Leonard's Road, Ascot Vale, what actions will the developers be taking to prevent the overshadowing of the main living area of 3 St Leonard's Road that would be caused by the proposed development? Second question, what actions will the developers be taking to address the surface issues on the gravel laneway between 1 and 3 St Leonard's Road, given traffic will increase significantly as a result of the proposed development?
Thank you. I'll ask Mr Barry to respond to those questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And in response to Anthony, thanks for your questions. The first question on overshadowing. The proposed development complies with the relevant clause guiding daylight to new windows in the planning scheme. And the assessment done by the planners determined that the living room windows of dwelling 3 have an area clear to the sky within the required minimum area of 3 square metres and a minimum dimension of 1 metre. The second question relating to the laneway. In the agenda tonight, condition 14 of the proposed recommendation of the planner's report to grant a permit requires the construction of a laneway to council satisfaction for the length that it abuts this subject site. And this will address the concerns with the current surface of the laneway. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Barry. And our next questionnaire, I would like to call Miss Caterina Giangeli to the lectern.
Good evening. The first question I have is regarding the fence again, in relation to items A to D, which she's asked me not to read out. Why has the developer not made the necessary height adjustments for the fence in St Leonard's Road to enable the lot to remain in keeping with the entire length of the street, including consistency in height for the length of the property, and most importantly, safe for pedestrians and vehicular traffic, remembering that there is extensive traffic here, foot, bike, car, due to the proximity to this train station? And question 2 is linked to the lack of access at number 1 St Leonard's Road to the adjacent property. Can the responsibility for maintaining the lawn outside the property on St Leonard's Road be included in the section 2 or plans or rules for that lot? This is a concern because with long grass and up to 12 bins on the nature strip, there's bound to be trip hazards, forcing pedestrians to walk on the road to access the train station. And this is particularly concerning with the advanced demographic age of people in the area. And further, is there a waste management plan that can be documented in the section 32 development rules or plans to ensure that the smell of 12 bins is not overwhelming for the residents, i.e. by limiting the number of bins that can be left out for pickup and the timely removal of bins following pickup?
Mr Barry, could you please respond?
I think there was another question.
That someone else apparently was meant to be discussing the setback, so they asked me not to read that one.
Madam Mayor, in response then to Katerina's questions, the existing fence along St Leonard's Road fences along St Leonard's Road range in height from 1.2 metres at the corner of St Leonard's and the Crescent. 1.8 metres along St Leonard's Road, and then before reducing in height to 1 metre at the intersection with the laneway. Furthermore, in the agenda tonight, condition 1C in the recommendation for this item requires the provision of a 1 metre by 1 metre splay at the interface with the laneway, and this will address the concerns regarding the movement and safety of pedestrians and vehicles in that area. The second part of that question related to waste. Given the scale of the proposed development, waste collection will be undertaken by council collection, and all the necessary requirements for and rules regarding collection will then prevail in that instance.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Thank you to all those people who put in questions tonight. Our next item is reports from special committees, but as there are none tonight, we shall move to our first report on tonight's agenda, and that relates to a planning application at 1 St Leonard's Road, Ascot Vale. So, councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Marshall?
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I'd like to move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation with a couple of additional conditions, please. And they will read, condition 1L, the 1.5 metre high timber paling fence along St Leonard's Road of Dwelling 4 to be set back 500 millimetres from the northern boundary and appropriately landscaped. And then condition 7G, screen planting in front of the timber paling fence of Dwelling 4 within the St Leonard's Road frontage must be at least 1.5 metres high at planting and a minimum height of 2 metres at maturity, with the purpose of landscaping being to screen the fence.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Are there any questions regarding this item, councillors? Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, this is a slightly unusually shaped site of a bit over 700 square metres at the top of the hill on the corner of the Crescent and St Leonard's Road. It's close to Ascot Vale Railway Station. The proposal is for 4 double-storey dwellings and with a sort of carport or garage and studio element at the top. When we had the consultation, there was discussion about those studio levels, and the discussion plans that have been provided by the applicant have actually removed that studio level from dwellings 3 and 4. And as mentioned by Mr. Barry, that's actually reflected in the proposed conditions. I will just, as a slight sidetrack, because this is an issue that comes up constantly, and it's why the notice of motion that I put forward last week is talking about trying to make sure that when we have these situations that residents receive the plans and looking at improvements in that space. So I will very much look forward to that report coming back to council with those suggested improvements. Just briefly, I'll discuss some of the concerns at the consultation, although obviously some of them have been answered earlier in the questions. I know there were some concerns expressed about overlooking, and there is a condition requiring obscured glazing to address those overlooking and privacy concerns, which are very important. There was quite a lengthy discussion in the consultation about the right-of-way and the drainage issues that occur, and a resident who had basically almost taken on responsibility for actually maintaining that the gravel right-of-way. So there is a requirement along the tidal boundary for that right-of-way to be made and for there to be appropriate drainage in place, and I think that that's a very important condition to have been included. There was a general discussion also at the consultation in relation to concerns about drainage more generally, and this is an issue that we certainly have in Ascot Vale, where we have older properties and drainage that at times is under stress. And again, in the conditions proposed as part of this application, there are a number of conditions which will address the drainage issue. There's a drainage layout plan required, and also an on-site detention system that will be required as part of this proposal. In terms of other matters that were raised, parking, again, given the proximity to the railway station, is an ongoing and very difficult issue to balance, and this application, with the removal of the studio levels on the two dwellings 3 and 4, actually complies now with the car parking requirements, and importantly too, there will be no parking permits granted to any resident who should live in these properties. In terms of the height, this is proposed to be 8.1 metres, and noting that there's a mandatory 11 metre height limit for this particular site, so obviously it's well under that. It has a high level of compliance with the other things that we look at as markers of an overdevelopment. So it has 59.16% site coverage, high permeability of 40.83%, and it also exceeds the mandatory garden requirements of 30% for this site, coming in at 35.66%. From an architectural perspective, there has been an attempt to fit in with, as the indication from Mr. Barry, what is a terrace form both on the Crescent and also on St Leonard's and other streets around this area, where that terrace style is quite popular. And we have pitched roofs and eaves, which again are in fitting in with the significant number of dwellings around this area. Importantly too, and without this I can fairly confidently say that I would not be supporting this application, there is an actual break between the dwelling and the carport, and that's similar if you look at the plans around the area. That is a similar pattern to many of the other properties. And one of the issues that we've had on corner sites is where we have basically a property extending from front almost to the rear of the boundary, and it doesn't do that in this instance. It has a very clear break between the garage and the dwelling at the front. Obviously, in an area like this, we're always concerned about heritage, even if the property itself doesn't have a heritage overlay. But again, given the attempts from the built form that has been chosen to fit in with the neighbourhood and the pitch roofs and things like that, I think it will not diminish the value of any nearby heritage properties. Sorry. Now, yes, I will. Thank you for prompting me. My big concern was around that interaction with the St Leonard's Road aspect, and I certainly was concerned about the fence, because I think that proposal to have a 1.8 metre timber paling fence running down the front of St Leonard's as you move down St Leonard's Road would be detrimental to the neighbourhood. At the moment, we all know that there are significant trees and greenery around there, so I think to replace that with screening through landscaping is a way that will mitigate the impacts of having a paling fence just hit you in the face as you come around the corner or head up St Leonard's. And I think, again, that benefit of having greenery is a really important one, and it will provide some screening in a sense as you move down St Leonard's, as you move to the magnificent properties that bit further down. It won't be that starkness between what is very high fence moving to those low fence forms. So I certainly understand the concerns of the residents in relation to that, and I think that this is a way to address it. Being mindful that otherwise, if you look at the types of things that we often see on sites like this, of this size and in proximity to the railway station, that this application itself has a high level of compliance with the planning scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak?
Just very briefly, in support of Councillor Marshall's motion and the amendments that she has raised as part of the motion. The critical thing that I get out of this is a lot of developers, when they get very close to a railway station, start to consider what are the opportunities to employ parts of the planning schemes and what the directions are from government and so on like that to maximise what they have to do, to minimise what they have to do to get the maximum compliance. And in this case, that's not the case. And I'm pleased in some ways that we've actually been able to say, yes, there is car parking, when they could have quite easily pulled that on the basis of here's a railway station right at the front door type of thing, which is a common argument. I'm also pleased that as Councillor Marshall has raised, the questions around the studio element is critical. We've already had this in several occasions in this municipality where studio elements have become, granny flats have become almost another house on the block, and therefore all the other stuff that's expected as an amenity flows into it. Well, we can't have that. It's got to go the other way and stay that way. And the removal of that them for 3 and 4 is critical. Along with also, obviously, the highlighted issue of the attempt in terms of design to blend in or have some respect for the built form of the neighbourhood through the pitched roofs and eaves. So I'm supporting Councillor Marshall's motion, much in line, obviously, with what the officer's recommendation was, but with those other changes, and noting that it is important that that area, that side of that building into St Leonard's Road is an introduction into a very beautiful street that has lots of plantings and lots of greenery. So I'm looking forward ultimately to see that landscaped to the level that we expect within the conditions of this planning permit.
Thank you, Councillor Sopik. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Nation.
It's Councillor Cusack, not Sopik.
Councillor Cusack, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I won't add much other to say that we do have a duty as councillors when the rules are set in the Moonee Valley planning scheme, that when we get an application that is adherent to pretty much all clauses in the planning scheme, that we have a due diligence to assess that application, and in this instance, in my view, approve this application. When you look at that clause 55 table, there are only a few of the clauses where this application doesn't comply with the standard. B17, obviously, because it's a unique corner site, and the further conditions pretty much make it fully compliant. I acknowledge that there's people in the gallery and people probably watching at home that that don't like development, don't like any development, but we've set these rules. We've got an application that's come to us which adheres to the majority of these standards, if not objectives. So we need to assess the application based on those rules, and therefore I'll be supporting Councillor Marshall's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next report relates to a planning application at 8 Janet Street, Keilor East. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to put up a refusal that the counters issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV-358-2018 for the construction of 3 double-storey dwellings at 8 Janet Street, Keilor East Lot 116 on plan of subdivision 052639 in accordance with the following grounds. 1. The proposal does not achieve the mandatory 35% garden area in accordance with clause 32.08-4 general residential zone of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. 2. The proposal fails to achieve acceptable outcomes in terms of neighbourhood character. In particular, it does not respond appropriately to the design guidelines of the Garden Court 4 precinct under the Moonee Valley Neighbourhood Character Study 2012 in relation to A. Building height, form and layout, and B. Building materials, design and details. 3. 3, the proposal fails to comply with the following provisions of Clause 55 of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. A, Clause 55.03-1, Standard B6 street setback. B, Clause 55.04-3, Standard B19, daylight to existing windows. C, Clause 55.04-6, Standard B22, overlooking. And D, Clause 55.05-5, Standard B29, solar access to open space. 4, first floor layout provides poor internal amenity for the future occupants of the dwellings. And 5, the tandem car parking space of dwelling 3 creates poor amenity from the living room of dwelling 2.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Thrace. Any questions regarding this 10.2, councillors? No? Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To paint a brief picture of Janet Street and this application, it's number 8 Janet Street, and the proposal is for 3 double-storey dwellings, each with 3 bedrooms on a 650 square metre lot. Janet Street's between Rochelle Road and Dinah Parade, 1 street back from Rosehill Park. Limited public transport as opposed to obviously close to train stations. Sometimes I suppose when looking at planning applications, I have to think really hard as to whether or not it should be approved as per the officer recommendation, whether extra conditions need to be added in to make it a bit better, or whether it is just a blunt refusal. And as we've just seen in the previous application, it can be really hard when we have to match things up with Res Code. But what was easy about this one was that one of the mandatory things with Res Code is not achieved, and that is the mandatory 35% garden area in accordance with Clause 32.08-4 of the GRZ of the Moonee Valley Planning Schemes. So, as I said, in terms of planning schemes, there are very few things that are mandatory that we can put a straight line through, but not achieving the minimum garden area is definitely one. And why doesn't it meet it? Well, quite basically, in my opinion, they decided to not meet it because it would seriously compromise the livability of the dwellings, which I'll touch on later. I just think that they've tried to squeeze on too many dwellings on too little bit of land. They tick just over into that 650 square metres, and that's why they have to comply with the 35% garden area. It just doesn't fit. What else they've done is that they haven't complied with the front setback. These things have been conditioned, but I just don't think that they can do it without further reducing the internal amenities. So my 4th and 5th reasons for refusal, I want to touch on number 4, being the first floor layout provides poor internal amenity for future occupants of the dwellings. When you actually dissect the plans and really look into them, most 3-bedroom properties, which these ones will be, when you go up the stairs, there's some sort of an area to sit. Not in these dwellings. You go up the stairs and it's bang, 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 door, 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 going into 3 bedrooms. Downstairs, they're already small enough, and the livability downstairs, if you can imagine, with 3 kids, which is what the application is potentially looking for, 2 kids or whatever it might be, 3 bedrooms, it just doesn't quite add up. They're very small, they're very pokey, and it just doesn't quite work on this block, in my opinion. The next point that I want to touch on is the tandem car parking. This is one that I haven't seen before come through in this chamber, and it's whilst we've seen plenty of tandem car parking before, this one's a little bit different because there's 3 on the block with the front dwelling, the middle, and then the back. And they all need to provide 2 car spots because of the turning circles and the way they have to work. The cars for dwelling 3, there is one in the garage and there is one directly out the front, which is the same as dwelling 1. But the problem with that is that the car parked in front of the garage of dwelling 3 is approximately 2 metres from the kitchen window of dwelling 2. And that includes the kitchen bench. So if you can sort of imagine cooking your dinner and you've got your bench here and then 1 metre, which is the 1 metre garden bed, which was included in the not 35% mandatory garden area, you're going to see a car, but it's not even your car, it's someone else's car. So when looking through this application, and I could talk again about just the form and layout, how it just doesn't fit in the area, being double storey, being just the wrong neighbourhood character. I just think look, whilst we do need to increase density, and we understand some people really do like living in townhouses, there's some townhouses that we should be looking at and we should be approving, but this one, it just doesn't work, and I hope that councillors will support me in this refusal. In East Keilor, we see a lot of 2 dwellings on a block, and I think that the reason why is because that's what can fit. 3, it just doesn't work, not in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I concur with Councillor Byrne and her comments that she's made, and thank you for putting up a refusal for this application. I drove down Janet Street yesterday, so I have a very fresh vision of what the street looks like, and it is predominantly older style single-storey homes, and further up the road there is a 5-bedroom home, double-storey, which is quite substantial, that I think may have just been sold. I think that there was a real estate board out the front and may have been sold. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the consultation on the 3rd of December, but I would have liked to have been there to hear directly the objections. There were 26 objections. I did notice that there was a double-storey development. I think it was at the corner of Faulkner Crescent of 2 units. But when you look down the street, there are no other multi-unit developments in that street. As Councillor Byrne has said, the internal layout is very small and, quite frankly, quite unlivable. If you speak to a lot of real estate agents that try and either rent or even sell these units, they find it very difficult because people can't even get a bed properly into these units. I don't believe that it blends or enhances the character of the neighbourhood at all. I've had a look at the plans. I haven't seen the coloured pictures of the plans, but I've looked at the architect's drawings of the units, and I don't believe that they are in character with the neighbourhood. As for the tandem parking that you'd mentioned earlier, I've recently myself moved into just a 2-bedroom single-storey unit in Keilor East. And I note that the double-storey unit in front of mine is a single-storey, and I wish we had developers come to look and build single-storey units, because for people like myself that want to downsize and want something smaller, I don't want to be going up and down stairs. So I believe that a lot of people and developers in that respect should be looking at providing a diversity of development in the area or across Moonee Valley. So they're my issues. So in relation to the tandem parking, I noticed that where my driveway is, I'm at the end, so I go straight through the driveway into my garage, which is great. But the unit in front of me has a turning into their garage, and I drive a small car, and I found it difficult to turn in there to try and do a U-turn or reverse to go out. It was quite impossible. And if they have a big car, I don't even think they're going to get into their garage. So just everyday livable experience of things in development need to be tweaked. They need to be looked at when developers come to us with their plans of what they want to build. I understand they have financial commitments and they want to try and utilise as much of the land that they purchase as they can. I think if the developer came back with 2 units on the site, it would probably be more acceptable and more livable. They'd be able to have more space to provide for potential purchasers or tenants to live in. So I support that motion to refuse the application.
Thank you, Councillor Straus. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? Councillor Marshall.
I'm happy to speak in support of the motion, and for me, while I'm very much convinced of your grounds 2 to 5, for me ground 1 was enough to knock this out, because there are few mandatory controls under the planning scheme, and if you want to lodge a permit application that does not comply with those mandatory controls, then that should knock it out. We shouldn't try and help you get to that point by conditioning or otherwise. That is an absolute dead set knockout. So, as I said, I'm very convinced by your other grounds too, but for me that in itself would have been enough.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is Flemington Community Centre at Debney's Park, draft concept options. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to 1, approve the release of the 3 concept options for community consultation from 27th of March 2019 for a period of 6 weeks, noting the $40 million budget available for this project is sufficient to cover only the hub component of the broader long-term plan. 2, acknowledge the significant work and input to date on the hub from the Flemington Neighbourhood Advisory Group. 3, note the consultation to be conducted will include, without limitation, A, providing information for members of the Flemington Neighbourhood Advisory Group and Flemington Association to distribute amongst their networks. B, sessions in languages other than English. C, online participation through surveys. D, a presentation to the Flemington Association at a date and time to be agreed with the Flemington Association. E, drop-in sessions at the Flemington Community Centre, the Flemington Library and other local venues, and providing information at the Flemington Library, Farnham Street, Crown Street Stables, the Flemington Community Centre and other local venues.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. So as part of MB 2040, it's been identified that there will be a new Flemington Community Hub, but it's fair to say that the need for a new Flemington Community Hub Centre was identified some years ago, and it's certainly something that has been raised a number of times during my time as a councillor. The current centre is much loved, we know that, it's much used, absolutely, and it is at the end of its life, and we've had to spend money maintaining that facility and making sure that things such as the roof and the flooring, and I'm sure the CEO has a list of other maintenance obligations that have been incurred, and quite serious matters too, because obviously we need to make sure that it's a safe place for people to be at. But aside from the actual elements with the building, just in terms of the needs of the community, the spaces are full, there is probably a lack of flexibility, and it was built in a way which reflects design thinking of the time, and that's totally fine. So the question is, if it needs to be replaced, what should it be replaced with? And that's where we're at the moment. There has been obviously a significant period of consultation up to this point in time, and there's been a whole range of different things that have occurred. The Flemington Neighbourhood Advisory Group has had a very significant number of meetings, and quite a number of which I've managed to get along to, which has been great. And the group has provided a range of different inputs and helped set the parameters for, in terms of the functional elements, what we're proposing to put out there on consultation. And I think that that's a real positive. As noted, there is $40 million in the long-term capital works plan at this stage for the hub and the things that will be needed to make that hub function as it is proposed. But for the broader design elements, we will be asking the community, all right, well, which of these proposed different elements around the whole precinct do you like? Which are the things that really matter to you? And then looking at additional funding requirements, and there's a whole range of ways that could happen. So you will see in the proposals that we have that there are 3 different designs proposed, and they are very different. And I like that about them. There are pros and cons of the different design elements, and I think most people would be able to find something from a design perspective and how the buildings will function, or the building, that is pleasing to them. There'll be people who don't like the particular design, but there should be some elements within that most people you would expect would be pleased by. A couple of things that it's worth mentioning, and that is in relation to Debney Meadows Primary School. That is something that is up in the air, and certainly the Department of Education have indicated that there are no plans at this stage in relation to that, but we also know that there's a Flemington Education Precinct plan that's going to be happening, so obviously we'll see how that plays out. The Flemington Housing Estate redevelopment, again, we don't know what will happen with that, but it's one of those situations that I'm really mindful of and have raised previously, the importance of, again, in this instance, we've got a facility that needs to be replaced, so we need to get about replacing it. You'll note that there's a proposal as part of one of the options to potentially relocate children and family services as part of the hub and to have Hopeton as a green gateway, if you like. So again, be interested to see what the community thinks of that idea. The issue of location, we had a question about that earlier, and it's been an interesting journey for me on the issue of location because there have been a couple of different spots that I've thought, okay, well, where could a community centre go or community hub? And then as I've interrogated my thinking and really considered what has been driving it, particularly with one of those options, it was an option that probably wasn't driven by planning principles, but rather almost attempting to serve as what might be a blocker to some projects that we mightn't like to necessarily happen in this part of the world. And I think there was a naivety in my thinking around that as I've reflected on that. And we know that if people want to do projects, unfortunately, they will compulsorily acquire what they need. So I, again, was mindful about how my thinking was leading me to particular points that weren't necessarily based on sound principles. So have very much reviewed the information provided by Don Goldsworthy, who, as our director indicated earlier, has provided urban design, Mayor, yes, thank you, again the second time tonight, provided architectural and urban design advice, and is someone who has received an Order of Australia for his expertise in that area. So that's why the location has been proposed as it is, a whole range of measures that are set out in the material. I think one of the things too that's really important as we think about any building is that sense of permeability, and it often doesn't come through on 2D or even 3D plans. So I really hope people will look at that and consider that as part of their, when they're looking at the different options. One of the things I would like to comment with the attachment, there's some wording there around will include, and for me, there's no will include. We are going out to the community to say these are the elements that have been raised in the numerous meetings that we've had with the Flemington Neighbourhood Advisory Group of the proposed different elements within the hub. But people might come up with some great ideas that we hadn't thought about, even though there's been a very large group of people at times participating in that. So we certainly need to keep an open mind and see what information comes out of the consultation. But briefly, you will see that the elements that have come out of that Flemington Neighbourhood Advisory Group process are things like having a fit for purpose community hub, 2 indoor highball courts which are adaptable for other uses, community sports pavilion, cafe and kitchen garden, a whole range of potential uses in the hub and around the hub. So it's quite a long consultation period, but I think it's entirely appropriate given the nature of the project and given that there are some events in there that mean it's appropriate for it to be extended out. And as I read out in the proposed motion, we're going to do a significant amount of additional consultation and welcome all ideas that people might have in I have to get your big stick out, in relation to the proposed options we're putting out on consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well done for your advocacy on this motion, Councillor Marshall. And you probably knocked off most of what I was going to say. The work that's been done by the Flemington Neighbourhood Advisory Group, or lovingly called the FNAG, is... you won't let me say that, okay, has been quite extensive. It goes back to things like, on day one, asking the very question about what or who should be consulted in any of this sort of development. And so even the advisory group has taken up right from the beginning that issue. And through that, there was an identification of upwards of 100 different groups, organisations, some formal, some very informal, all around the Flemington area and bits of Kensington, little bits of Ascot Vale and North Melbourne that really needed to be part of this consultation. So we've worked that back into what the council's got in terms of how it's going to go about the consultation. So adding on to the normal stuff that you would have on the net and things like that, there's also a significant amount of work that is being done in other languages, other different locations. And just for instance, you obviously have the Flemington Kensington News, a community paper that was set up by the community and run by the community, takes no rubbish from anybody and pushes out a pretty good line. And it will be part of getting some of that information out and about into people's letterboxes. Just quickly though, that the argument for getting the hub redone, remember this was a ballet studio. It was never designed as a community centre. And as a consequence, you can see how it has had bits tacked onto it over the years in order to be able to make it fit for purpose. And now those bits are failing and it's not fit for purpose. And it's not fit for purpose for a very spectacular reason as well, and that is that while it works double pace on trying to address the issues for the people who live on the housing estate, it's never been a source of or a resource for the rest of the community that surrounds it, whether it's the alt building, which I won't say more, but you've got the Flemington Hill. You've also got bits of Ascot Vale, bits of Moonee Ponds coming down on that tram line and into North Melbourne. I know they're the wrong side of the border, but very important part of the life of the whole community. And we need to be able to have a resource that talks and works with all of those things together. So this is a really important step. It's a very exciting one. It will shape up our thinking. Can I have another 30 seconds or so? It will shape up our thinking about what it should look like and where it will perform to. The designs themselves, as Councillor Marshall said, are very interesting ones. The main big thing that was about those designs was making them permeable, making them work back into that outside space. Now we know the outside space ain't going to be right for a long time, but we do have a lot of partners who are potentially going to work with us in that. And one of the major ones is obviously around the Moonee Ponds Creek over time and the reclamation of all of that. And so we have opportunities through different funding sources that will be attracted to this space, not just because it's a good idea to do something sweet, it's also because it is fitting in with the objectives of those organisations, whether it's about greening them, whether it's about being a job generator, whether it's about being an opportunity for people to actually start small businesses and so on like that. It's about how people work together, learn together and create leisure together.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Nation?
Thanks, Mayor. I echo the points of my fellow ward councillors about this being an extremely exciting project that will hopefully cater for those on the estate, those in the broader Flemington community, and even those that Councillor Cusack mentioned in the alt buildings. There's a lot of new residents to Moonee Valley that reside there. There's thousands of residents there, and creating facility that all different parts of the community can come together and use is a really exciting prospect. There's an extensive engagement plan on top of the points covered there by Councillor Marshall, which is comprehensive. It's backed by a Phase 3 engagement program, which is extremely extensive, which will continue to shape what we end up with, what our final product is, and there are some quite exciting designs. I do want to note that all the bells and whistles and extra stuff, not to get too carried away, yes, it's a master plan, but we're talking about the hub, how it can best be functional. I agree. I think a hub is centre, so I have no issues with the location because a hub, as the word suggests, is central, and then you've got different elements radiating off that particular location. So no issues with that. Let's see what this Phase 3 of community consultation engagement brings, but it's something that we should all be extremely excited about It is going to be the largest project this council's undertaken in the southern end of our municipality. So it's exciting, and I look forward to further designs coming to us.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Race.
Just a few things to add to the and to support the proposed motion. I think it's really important that council always gets bagged because, you know, what do we do? What do we provide? What do we give to the community? And seeing is believing, and I think in the long term, when we're putting lots of money into major projects or large projects across the municipality, I think the success of that is that people see where their rates have gone, where funding from other levels of government have gone, and where council have made those decisions to provide great facilities for the community. This is not just about the Flemington, the broader Flemington community and the estate. It's about the whole of the city of Moonee Valley. So I really encourage people to have a look on our website and to get involved, because you never know, people from Airport West or people from Niddrie that might want to come down and use this facility, because it's for everyone, as Councillor Nation has said, not just for select people around the Moonong ward or around that part of the municipality. So I think it's important to note in item 1 that the $40 million budget that is available for the project is sufficient to cover only the hub component. So all the other wish list items would have to be certainly either funded, hopefully by state or federal funding, or much further down the track when our budget allows for that. So it's very exciting. I'm very happy to see that the consultation will go ahead and that people can have their say, and from all parts of the municipality. And at the end of the day, when we get this fantastic hub built, it'll be something worth the community saying, well, that was great, and maybe they were part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strace. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm a bit torn with this one. I love this area and I understand the need for a new community hub. I actually used to work just off Macaulay Road, and I used to go into Surrey Holland Court, and I used to work in and around that area. So I do know it very well, even though I'm obviously a Rose Hill Ward councillor. But my issue is that I honestly just don't think that it is fair to the community to be putting out a plan, which, yes, we've endorsed $40 million in the long-term plan for the hub, but we do not have any money at all put aside for anything else within that area. We've endorsed a long-term capital works program. We've got MV 2040, and we do not have $1 set aside. Now, the reason why I say this is when I first came onto council in 2016, I was probably known as a bit of a straight shooter because I had to go around to a lot of sporting clubs, or sporting clubs came to me and said, oh, we've been promised this in whatever year and whatnot, and I felt like a bit of a bad guy, and I pulled out the capital works plan and I said, oh no, actually you're due to be done this year or whatever. And then MV 2040 came along, and most of the capital works had to then be pushed out again. And so I had to go back to various clubs, and normally they were clubs. There's obviously different things that have been pushed out in terms of a lot of the greenery and waterways and whatnot as well, and say, sorry, but you've been pushed out again. And these things are all things that are in our long-term capital works plan. And my issue is that the surrounding the hub is an extra $25 million, which we don't have any money put aside for. So how are we going to get this $25 million? Keeping in mind that when we went for a $50 million project for the East Killer Leisure Centre, we got $3 million plus an interest-free loan worth, I think, about $2 million on a $50 million project. So if we're only going to be looking at a few million here and there, the rest will probably be funded by, realistically, I think the rest will be funded by council. And I don't want to have to go back to community members and say, oh, you know, what was in our plans? Well, yep, sorry, we've had to bring something else forward and we're pushing you back. And I know there will be a little bit of that, but for $25 million, I see that as quite significant. If we do go ahead with this, we're going to have a really big think as a council in terms of what we do. Do we cut services? Do we cut childcare? Do we cut aged care? Do we cut the depot and all of the services there? Or do we raise revenue? And obviously I don't want to touch on what's happening later tonight with the parking meters. Or do we start charging more for services? But our budget's in such a position that I think that it would be financially irresponsible for me to be voting for this when I just cannot see at the moment that we have the money allocated, and I think that it is unfair to the community to be putting such a bold plan out, to be saying, have a look at all of this, isn't this great? But it's not allocated up until 2040, but we might start working on it in 2041. That's how I'm sitting with it, that's how I feel. Obviously the other councillors are thinking differently, but just no doubt that we need a new hub, but I think that if we've got $40 million allocated, we need to be bringing in the size of the hub so we've got money for the surrounds. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Marshall, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. Isn't it? It's interesting, that whole concept of having to ask for more money and how that works. And I think the reality is that the ratepayers of Flemington, who contribute a very significant amount, as does the rest of the southern part of the municipality, to the coffers of Moonee Valley to help fund projects in our less dense area, are absolutely deserving of a well-designed, appropriate project. And I think, respectfully, this is going out on consultation with a clear note that we have $40 million in the long-term capital works plan for the hub. And if you think about how you would like this whole precinct to look, which parts do you like? Do you like that idea? Do you like this idea? It might come back and everyone says, hate all the other ideas. You know what, just do the hub and have some grounds around there. We don't know. So it might be a really minor amount that we're talking about. It might come back and everyone says, oh, we want every single element there, this one, that one. And then once we've got that feedback, then we make a decision about what we can and can't afford. This is simply about saying, we've got $40 million for the hub. Tell us what you think about the elements of this and how this will look. But if the suggestion is we don't put this out on consultation because we don't have the whole thing fully funded, well then my suggestion would be that we do not put a single thing out on consultation ever again, because we never have them fully funded. So I'm not clear that that's what you're saying, Councillor Van. I'm assuming that that's not the case, but we need to be absolutely clear. I take the point in relation to the communications that are put out there, and this is about the community coming back to us and saying, this is how we want the precinct to look. This is the amount that we've got for a hub. How do you want the hub to look? Where do you want the hub to be? Those sorts of questions. But as I said, I feel that the Flemington community, the southern part of the municipality, we have enormous amounts that we are experiencing in terms of growth, and we need facilities that appropriately will provide for our communities, and it's only fair.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Serace, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Cusack. All those against? Councillor Byrne. Thank you. That is carried. Agenda item 10.4 is the Welcoming Cities Network and Supporting Diversity Statement Update. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move an amended motion that Council resolves to A, note the status of recent Council actions in support of cultural diversity as outlined in attachment B. B, will become a member of the Welcoming Cities Network, and C, write to the Welcoming Cities organisation advising them of this decision, including signing the commitment form outlined in attachment C.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Serace?
I'll go to Brisbane.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, thank you, Mayor. And before I begin talking about this motion, I do want to also acknowledge the tragic loss of lives in Christchurch and express to our own Islamic community here in Moonee Valley that we are a diverse city, we are an inclusive city, and through this motion, hopefully we'll officially become a welcoming city. We stand together as one and reiterate our supporting diversity statement as follows. Council acknowledges that Moonee Valley is home to people from all over the world. Communities of diverse cultural backgrounds, faiths, ethnicities and languages contribute to Moonee Valley as a thriving community. We believe this diversity gives great strength and vibrancy to Moonee Valley. Racism and discrimination undermine the health and well-being of individuals, families and communities and prevent people from participating fully in everyday life. We stand together against racism and discrimination and we ask our community to do the same. So this statement is one of two key initiatives of Council over the past 12 months as Council continues to celebrate our diverse and inclusive city. The other key initiative and report that has come before Council is our Joint Council Statement against changes to the Status Resolution Support Services program for people seeking asylum. Tonight's report, through Appendix B, highlights some of the further progress that Council has made in this area, with the recommendation that Moonee Valley joins the Welcoming City Network. There are approximately 135 municipalities around the world that are members of the Welcoming Cities Network, and Moonee Valley would be the 30th in Australia. With more than a quarter of our residents born overseas and a third speaking a language other than English, joining this network makes sense. The network is about inclusion at all levels and is a process by which local councils, businesses and communities can embrace and integrate migrant communities for greater social cohesion and economic success. As the report outlines, joining this network would complement, showcase and enhance Council's existing commitments and leadership to cultural diversity. It would inform and be a useful resource in the development of the MV 2040 Fair Action Plan, and it would provide access to best practice cultural diversity and inclusion programs through knowledge sharing. Given the great progress Council is making in this space, joining the Welcoming Cities Network is a way of us continuing to be a leading council. The only change to the recommendation that I would propose, and that's the recommendation that's in the agenda, is removing spending $3,000 to fly a councillor or representative up to Brisbane for the Welcoming Cities Symposium. Given at this stage we are putting $3,000 towards our membership to be a welcoming city and have only contributed $1,000 to the Joint Council initiative to fight cuts to the State Resolution Support Services program, I just think it would be fairly inconsistent to spend just as much money flying a councillor up to Brisbane for 2 nights. So I commend this alternative to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Serace, would you like to speak to the motion?
I don't really have much more to add, but just to support the motion.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Cusack?
Just very pardon me, Mayor. Just very briefly, just to point out a couple of interesting bits and pieces, I suppose, is that one, if we're going to be a city that has a relevance to our emerging communities, we need to be a city that is part of this welcoming network. We're regularly standing up and saying how diverse we are, and talking about our initiatives to provide opportunities for people to integrate into our community and successfully start and manage their own lives. But we can't do that if we step away from something as simple and basic as this. And how do we know that we're doing any good unless we're in the process of sharing ideas with our fellow councils? So it's a very cheap way of actually buying in expertise, frankly. I also note in the officer's notes about the economic impact of migration and multiculturalism in Moonee Valley and Australia more generally, 6.2. depends on our ability to foster social cohesion as population and cultural diversity grows. Over the next 35 years, migration will drive economic and skills growth in Australia. Migrants will contribute $1.6 trillion to Australia's GDP and 10% more to the economy than existing residents. And that's from the McKinsey Global Institute 2016.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is 10.5 and it is the 2018-19 Capital Works Program Update. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you.
Mayor, I'm happy to move the councillor's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconder for Capital Works Update.
For the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Thrace. Any questions, councillors? What did I say? Councillor Cusack. You're not even sitting in your spot. Sorry, Councillor Cusack. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Cusack?
I think the motion and the reports attached are pretty straightforward, and it shows that council is on track with most bits, and that it should, and that we do need to continue and work down that way. We will pick up and understand things a little bit more vigorously through the remaining part of, there will be a remaining part of the budget process, which will talk about what happens with projects that are continuing to linger on. But I'm also warmed by the fact that I believe that quite a number will be achieved in the near future and will work well. We have, you'll see that there are variations that have been agreed to and proposed there, and it's a difficult time for capital works within our community. Many costs are rising and changing dramatically, not just the cost of labour as people often associate with capital works, but simple things like being able to access concrete and I believe recent times things like electrical costs and so on like that have risen enormously. And there might be a silver lining for us on the basis that as other parts of the sector slow down, council might be able to feed off the fact that there is less competition for labour workers than has been in the past, so we might get somewhere in terms of the cost issues as well. I recommend the report.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Thrace, would you like to speak to the
Just
motion?
basically that the report is seeking authorisation for budget variations in addition to the variations endorsed through reports and or delegations to the 30th of January 2019, and therefore there's expected to have operational cost impacts. So it's the reason that I seconded the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thrace. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is 10.6 and it is a response to notice of motion 2018-08 Local Arts Display Trail. So councillors trial. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation?
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Marshall. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, thank you. Mayor, this original notice of motion was something I brought to council in March, about this time last year. And it was a very simple concept that we've got so many blank walls or underutilised walls throughout a myriad of council facilities, that why not display some local artists, some emerging artists, give them some exposure, and also appreciate the great work that's being done within this municipality across all mediums. You'll see tonight there's 4 pieces on the back wall. We've had a range of, that back wall, not that back wall, that back wall. We've had a range of different displays throughout the past 12 months. The table on page 57 of the agenda also shows the different locations where works have been exhibited, including the Clock Tower Cafe Gallery, Flemington Library, Crown Street Stables. There was the Billboard Project, which was fantastic, an outdoor exhibition. Also on the Green Spine, some mural work, as well as Council Chambers, the Sam Merrifield Library and Avondale Heights Library. And as the report explains, there's further expansion of this project planned, which is really exciting. I note point C that some people would like to see our photos or past photos of councillors still displayed, so there usually is that rotating board which is powered down tonight. But there is still that recognition of individuals that have served this council in their role as councillor, deputy mayor or mayor. But this was a very simple idea, and I'm glad that it's been embraced by councillors, by council staff, by the community, and it's fantastic that we've got so many artists doing some fantastic things, as I said, across a range of different mediums.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will to say that it was a fantastic idea, and it's one that you should really be commended on, Councillor Nation, because it's provided people with an opportunity to be exhibited where they might not otherwise have had that opportunity. And some of the artworks that we've seen on our back wall have just been really magnificent. I know some have not been to the taste of all councillors, but that is one of the great things about art. I personally could do without C and the rolling councillor photos, but I know it's important to some councillors, so I will respect that. But I think for me what has been beautiful, as I said, is just to see our walls decorated, to provide people with that opportunity for exposure, given the number of people that come in and out of this chamber for a whole range of reasons. So it was a great idea, and I'm very pleased that it's continuing.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Thrace?
Just to add on from Councillor Nation and Marshall, the council photographs previously exhibited in the council chambers have been scanned, and they now form part of council's online library catalogue that is publicly accessible. So that's good to know. I think out of respect for people that have served on the council, I think it's nice that we still have recognition of that and that we do have them displayed. I think it would be great if we could reach out to more people in the community that do have an artistic talent that may not be aware of what we're doing in regards to community art. That would be a fantastic way. Maybe we can find a way of putting something in the leader or getting the word out there that council has this program now that we display art from within the community, because the numbers aren't huge for a large municipality, but then again, some people may not think they have a lot of talent. In fact, they probably do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thrace. Any other councillor? Councillor Cusack?
I'm just reminded, Mayor, of the fireworks exhibition recently at the Incinerator Gallery, and there were over 300 odd people in attendance. It was a phenomenal evening. But what it did say, more than anything else, is that there is, as you have all pointed out, fellow councillors, a wealth of talent around our community in terms of artists, and they really do need to be out there. But it's interesting that I'm hearing regularly from the other from the officers in that area little ideas that they do have that are popping up. So in a sense, while this is a great initiative, Councillor Nation, and I absolutely think it's terrific, we should also, I suppose, be encouraging our arts people to think a bit more about how they might be able to apply this idea in a broader way, and not be afraid to come forward with some of it to us. So we have a real dearth of places in our municipality to present good art, but there are opportunities for us to maybe up those a little bit so that the art can be put out there. In particular, where you've got art that is a bit susceptible to the elements and humidity and whatever else.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item is 10.7 and it is the review of the advocacy strategy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack?
Oh, pardon me, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation as a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Byrne, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Simply to say, Mayor, that we have in this council formalised our advocacy processes over the last couple of years. We've been making significant inroads in promoting particular ideas. Some of those have actually come off for us, which is fabulous to see, and that we're able to secure money as either a contribution to the whole or part of certain projects. But of course, an advocacy project, an advocacy plan cannot stand still. It's one by very definition trying to address critical issues and big issues that are occurring in our community that our community has said that it wants done. And these are the things that we need to address. But things that there are critical parts of state policy and state planning that we're also attempting to address and influence. And in particular, the biggest of them all is, of course, the railway station somewhere in the Airport West world that is on the way out to the airport, and making that actually work for us. But other things are much, much more specific to us, and that's about making places safer. It's about making and supporting new plans for waste, which has been very topical of recent times and the likes of that. So I just commend to you the new plan.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Cusack, for moving the officer's recommendation. This is a really exciting advocacy strategy, and I do urge people of the community to have a look, because there were quite a few people in the community who did have a say on the Your Say page in terms of what the community wanted Moonee Valley Council to advocate for. Obviously, coming up to a federal election, we had to get our I's dotted and our T's crossed and actually come up with a plan. I'd also like to mention Megan Hopper, who put a lot of this together, and yourself, Madam Mayor, who's been going along to meetings and advocating for us, which will be great. And hopefully we can start seeing some of these come to life. As Councillor Cusack said, one of the top things, which I know Councillor Sorais is all over, is the train station at Airport West. It is something that the community in Moonee Valley, but particularly Rosehill Ward, have been screaming out for a train station for such a long time. And with the proposed route for the airport rail link going from the airport to Sunshine, it makes perfect sense that along that line to have a train station at Airport West. The cost is relatively minimal in the scheme of the whole project, and an extra 2 minutes onto people's journey is quite small. And the other thing we've got to pick up from this is not just the people who are coming into Melbourne by plane. We have so many workers in the city of Moonee Valley that actually work at the airport. We'll actually be taking cars off the road by getting people to hop on the train at Airport West. So if something is to happen, I really do hope that that's a big one. Debney's Park, which has obviously been topic of discussion already tonight, is on there. A really important project. The increased tree canopies and making the city greener. We are in the final four of an international award for greenery of the city and our canopy, so I think that will be great. And the other one that I could touch on quite a few things, but obviously we still have on here the indoor netball and basketball facility at Keilor East, which we received a petition of over 2,000 signatures, I'm going to say about 18 months ago, saying that we need an indoor netball basketball stadium, highball facility in Moonee Valley. So people who signed that petition, please don't think that we've forgotten about you, because we absolutely have not. We know that they're expensive, and we do call on our federal leaders to back in this facility, because it will be used for many, many years to come by an existing sports space that is already there waiting for the facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? Councillor Marshall?
Thanks, Mayor. One of the things I like about our advocacy is that we actually have become a bit more sophisticated, and that is really positive. And that was reflected in the relative success, you'd have to say, that we had in the lead up to the state election, and I think that's really positive. One of the things that I hate is sinking money into lost causes, and at times this council has done that and probably not been as flexible in our thinking as we should be, which is why I'm pleased in the advocacy strategy that in relation to a train station that we are looking at suburban rail, because while we could sink enormous sums of money and hope to get a train station at Airport West through the mail process, I think that's highly unlikely. And we, again, need to have that flexibility in our thinking to be getting in there early on the ground and not putting enormous amounts of resources, whether it be time, money or otherwise, into projects which we are not going to have success, because it's just fruitless. It's frustrating for us. It's frustrating for our community, because they feel like we have let them down in our advocacy. So I'm pleased about that there's that flexibility. There are a number of other items in here again, which I think we've been sensible in having an approach to not just capital works, but also in the service space, because it's a space that can be overlooked in some ways, because there mightn't be as many ribbons to be able to be cut. But certainly I'm really pleased to see the kinder commitment there, the support for local government aged services, the Back Your Neighbour campaign, and the number of other items in there that relate to services, because they are incredibly important and valued by our community. Some people may say, why are we advocating for a transport plan for the Maribyrnong Defence site? We are, because the impacts on Moonee Valley, if that site is developed as is to be expected, will be significant and enormous, and we need to get on the front foot. Also, I know that there's discussions about having green spaces again. Given the proximity to Moonee Valley, we need to make sure that we are in there with the conversation early, not having these battles when everything's already decided, as we've done in the past. So I think that that's really important. And look, fingers crossed that we have some success. And again, for me, it's about being flexible and not being dogged. And ultimately, if you are dogged as an advocate when you know you have no hope of being successful, then you're a very poor advocate in my view. So I think this is a balanced plan, and as I said, I hope that we have some success in the lead up to the election.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Thrace?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure, but I understood where it's got the priorities are a plan for a safer Essendon North intersection. It just says here Essendon. It doesn't actually clarify. I think in previous discussions we had that we clarified that was to be Essendon North intersection.
Got a point of clarification?
A point of clarification.
I can get clarification. I thought that had changed, but I might just check with Ms. Reiter. Yeah.
You've got the draft.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It has been updated in the subsequent copy. Apologies.
Thank you. Just whilst we're talking about
advocacy, I'd like to advocate as far as activating the Maribyrnong River, that on Saturday we have our Illuminate the River from 2 p.m. till 9 p.m, where we will have a water and laser show. There'll be food trucks and Indigenous dance and smoke ceremony happening. So when we talk about advocacy, I thought I'd just throw that in for people that might be watching this and just for people to attend as part of our Moonee Valley Festival. But I do like to see on here that, as Councillor Byrne has said, train station at Airport West. I've been to many meetings and to Canberra with the CEO, etc., advocating in the past for this, and hopefully it will at some stage be part of whatever train plan is mooted for the future. A transport plan for the Maribyrnong Defence Site is pretty vital, given that there is a potential for a huge amount of development there, and for what is already taking place with our neighbours at the City of Maribyrnong, and the high-rise that's going on around Wests Road and Rosamond Road and Raleigh Road. It's just amazing. And to think, where are the cars and the traffic going to go with limited transport? It's great that there is a tram there, but at what capacity can it hold? I mean, there's going to be so many more people at a future proposed development at Maribyrnong Defence Site. That's going to be a hard one. A safer Moonee Ponds Junction is important. So everything that we've got here that's been raised by this council, I think are all vital and they're all important. So hopefully our advocacy will fall on the right ears, and we'll have some strength in the people that represent us, both state and federally, to try and get those things put through, or even if we got a couple on our wish list, that would be a fantastic feat. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor wish to speak? Okay, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item is the independent member reappointment to Council's Audit Advisory Committee. So, councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne, thank you.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
This is a fairly straightforward one. Stephen is an experienced independent director that's been on the audit committee for the past 2 years, I believe, and he's made a really valuable contribution in this time. He specialises focus in internal audit, risk, probity, governance, corruption prevention and fraud control with a public sector context. He's extremely qualified, and having sat on the audit committee with him for 12 of the months, I think that he's a really valuable contributor, and I would recommend for him to stay on.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Cusack?
I want to endorse what Councillor Byrne has said about Stephen, but also as somebody who sits on the audit committee, I found his insights into some of the discussions really quite profound, and he does make a significant contribution to how discussion unfolds. And also just an observation that he brings quite an interesting national feel to the audit committee. He can talk not just about what's in a Victorian context, but he also raises other issues outside of Victoria, and I find that a fascinating addition to the key issues that we're got to consider as part of an audit committee.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is 10.9 and is titled Attendance at the 2019 ALGA National General Assembly of Local Government. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation?
I'll move an alternate motion that Council resolves to endorse the attendance of Councillors Narelle Sharp, John Sypek, Richard Lawrence and Jim Cusack at the Australian Local Government Association 2019 National General Assembly to be held in Canberra from 16/19 June 2019 in accordance with the Councillor Expenses and Reimbursement Policy. B, authorise the Mayor to seek and appoint an alternate councillor/councillors in the event that any of the councillors as appointed in A above are unable to attend. And C, note that all councillors who are approved to attend an interstate event must provide a written report for council by the third council meeting after their return from travel, outlining the following: purpose of conference, seminar, event or study tour, learning outcomes, applicable benefits to council, issues for consideration of council or councillors, and conclusion and recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Soares. Are there any questions, councillors? No? Councillor Marshall?
Just as a point of clarification, in relation to point 3, I'm assuming that each councillor has to provide a separate report.
I shall check point of clarification with Miss Watt. That is correct.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to your motion?
I will. The addition of point C is a sheer cut and paste from our councillor expenses policy, but important to reiterate that if $12,000+ of council funds are going to be spent on 4 councillors attending the National General Assembly, that it's important that council gets some sort of return in terms of information, in terms of learnings, and that's important for council as a whole and other councillors who aren't attending. Other than that, possibly those going or the 2 that are going that are here tonight want to speak further, but otherwise it's what has always been done, I guess.
Thank you. Councillor Soares, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, Madam Mayor. I've attended the ALGA conferences myself in the past, and I find that they are very informative, and I believe that I have submitted a report back to this council when I've attended. I think it's important that councillors do attend these assemblies of local government where issues are discussed. You learn from other councils how they work. The last one I went to, I recall there were 2 councils that worked and shared facilities and were able to financially have a more of a benefit or gain to each of those councils. I think it might have been Wodonga and somewhere neighbouring to them. So I think even if you get one thing out of a conference that you attend is important than nothing at all. So yes, I support councillors attending conferences or seminars that relate to local government because we are elected in that umbrella and realm to make decisions and to learn more about. I mean, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a town planner, and I think it's important that if we go to these seminars or we go to these conferences that we learn things. And as I said, if it's one thing we pick up and we can bring that back to this council, then it's something extra we've learnt or gained out of a seminar or a conference. I don't really have anything more to add to that, but just to say that this in particular, because it's from councils around Australia, you do gain some different aspects and some different insights as to what other councils, even perhaps in New South Wales or Northern Territory, do that we might be able to bring back to this council and learn from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Soares. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is the 3rd time that the ALGA conferences has come into the chamber, and first put my hand up to say the first 2 years I didn't support councillors going. But I suppose this year I am looking at it differently. I think last year, it might have been the year before, I may have called it a junket, but I'm thinking of it in a different light. I haven't been to this conference, but then I also don't think it's up to me to decide how councillors want to, I suppose, want their professional development. It's really important for councillors to have professional development, and for me, going to a conference and costing the amount of money for interstate travel. I wouldn't necessarily think that it would be beneficial. I'm more of a get a book and read it and use my highlighter. But that's me, and I appreciate that other councillors find that their professional development, the best way for them to grow as a councillor is to network with other councillors. So whilst I think 4 councillors going might look unusual, every councillor should be continuing their professional development, and I will be supporting it this year.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Cusack.
This is my once a year call on professional development, and in fact that I haven't been for the last couple of years. It's a bit of a hole in my professional development. But leaving that aside for a minute, the importance of this conference is the work, as Councillor Sorais was saying, around what happens with other councils. One of the most important workshops that they do is when councils come together and talk about a problem, an issue, and how it's been resolved, and to look at that from a number of different perspectives. And with all due deference to books and highlighter pens, you cannot get the nuances and the different conversations going. Consequently, the only other options are maybe the odd podcast or something like that that's around. So I think that I'm more than happy to share with fellow councillors what the experience was. I'm particularly looking forward to this council. It will be an opportunity to actually hear firsthand from government after an election, whichever party might win, about what their plans are for local government over the next 3 years and how that will happen, and seriously work into the potential around our advocacy program. So I think that this is a critical one for our council to be at and not to be as taking a backward step rather like other councils might do.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is titled Assembly of Councillors. Councillors, do I have a motion?
So moved, Madam Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Byrne. Any questions, councillors? Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Sorais? No. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion? Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. The next item is notices of motion, and we have 3 notices of motion tonight. Our first notice of motion is 2019-07, Advocacy for Increased Tree Canopy on Department of Education and Training sites. Councillor Sypek is obviously an apology for tonight's meeting, so would another councillor like to present his notice of motion, please? Councillor Marshall.
Mayor, I'd like to move that the Council write to the Minister for Education, the Honourable James Merlino MP, to advocate for an increase in the planting of trees on Department of Education and Training sites in Moonee Valley in support of Council's vision to increase the tree canopy across the city from 11% to 30% by 2040.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Byrne. Thank you. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, ultimately, obviously, what the Minister and the Department decide to do on their own land will be a matter for them, and there might be a whole range of reasons why they can't increase the tree canopy. But one thing we know with our very ambitious target of 30% canopy cover by 2040 is that we cannot do it on the land that Council owns. We just don't have enough land that we own or control to be able to plant sufficient number of trees to get to 30%. So it is important that we explore other options, and obviously we have some fairly significant sites that are school sites and education sites in Moonee Valley, and I think it's really important that we do explore those opportunities and see whether there might be some partnering opportunities too. So I'm happy to both move the motion that was Councillor Sypek's idea, obviously, and he cannot be here tonight, and hope that we have a favourable outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Byrne?
I just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Marshall said, that we do have these ambitious targets and we are trying really hard to get them. So our tree canopy, as I've mentioned earlier tonight, is something that we are in the top 4 in international award for. So it is extremely important, something that we should be extremely proud of, and something that we do desperately want to achieve. So we need to be looking at all of these other avenues to get that tree canopy up. And it's going to be an exciting and shadier place to live, hopefully.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Cusack?
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to highlight the reason that, or one of the really good reasons why Council is investing so much effort and energy into tree planting is because the western suburbs is a hot spot of Melbourne, and in fact we are significantly warmer than the eastern suburbs. And of course it's not an accident that they're often called the leafy green suburbs, and with the inference that they're cooler. And we need to address how the western suburbs, the flat basalt plains, and some of our tougher neighbourhoods that don't support good tree growth actually get in amongst it and do what we can where we can. So taking this up to the Education Department is a really good way for education and for the state government to participate in a greening program across the whole of the West. And certainly there's great opportunities for us to work in conjunction and collaboration with school principals and individual schools about what works and what doesn't work. And we have a wonderful Enviro team and rangers and so on like that who have done terrific work already in our municipality, and I'm sure that allowing some of that to spill over into the into our education facilities in this municipality would be most welcome. And I know that it just doesn't turn off, does it? I mean, when you leave the schoolyard, you walk back into the rest of suburbia. And so why shouldn't your schoolyard reflect the aspirations of the rest of the place you live in? And part of that is obviously greening it.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next notice of motion is 2019-8, review of secondary college zones. So I'll call on Councillor Byrne to present her notice of motion entitled Review of Secondary College Zones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to take notice that at the ordinary meeting of Council to be held on the 26th of March 2019, it is my intention to move that the Mayor writes to the Minister for Education, the Honourable James Molino, and the State Member for Nidjuri, the Honourable Ben Carroll, requesting 1, a review of the secondary college zones covering Avondale Heights. 2, that the review addresses the requirement for Avondale Heights residents travelling to Braybrook College or Sunshine College to travel through multiple suburbs and cross the Maribyrnong River. And 3, a formal response to Council indicating when and how the changing of the school zones can occur.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Soros? Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor Byrne?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there's a few reasons why this notice of motion has come about. First of all, I want to say that the state government currently is undertaking somewhat of a review, and it was reported in The Age, and potentially from this or potentially from other reasons, local residents have started to get on board. And a particular resident posted this on one of the local chat groups, one of the Facebook groups, and it gained quite a lot of attention quite quickly. And the reason why it was put on was she's an Avondale Heights resident, long-time Moonee Valley resident, and she assumed that her children would potentially be going to high school within Moonee Valley. And then it was mentioned to her by somebody else that, oh, no, actually, if you live in Avondale Heights, you may be zoned to Braybrook. And this was, I think, a bit of a shock to the system, and she looked into it and was quite rightly outraged. And then I looked onto this, and by looking at a map that is online, there are 5 zones which currently cover Avondale Heights. And Avondale Heights is a big area, and it's been done by bird's eye view. Unfortunately, to be zoned to Braybrook College or Sunshine College, as put to me, you could catapult your children across the Maribyrnong River. Now, that obviously isn't acceptable, and it's something that we should be advocating for people not to do. For people from Avondale Heights to get to Braybrook College or Sunshine, you obviously have to go right around either using the Ring Road or Maribyrnong Bridge, which isn't acceptable in terms of what we stand for as a council. Now, I do want to make note that Braybrook College is a designated neighbourhood zone. So if you live in Avondale Heights in the Braybrook zone, you are guaranteed to go there, but you don't have to go there. I don't want people to be listening to this thinking that you necessarily have to go to these zones. And currently, Rosehill High and EKC are not zoned, so you may be eligible to go to these schools. But what we are finding is, well, when I was in high school, Strathmore was the school that was zoned, and it was, unless you lived in the zone, you couldn't get in. And then that moved to include Buckley Park, and it's only going to be a matter of time before other schools are zoned. So people are looking ahead and going, well, we're not in the zone that we necessarily should be. And I think that as a council, it is really important that we advocate, whilst there is a review being undertaken, to ensure that the zones properly reflect what we want for our community. In our MV 2040 approach, we talk about our neighbourhoods. We talk about how we want school children, youth, parents, employees, grandparents to be able to easily access everything that they need, and that includes schools. And we need to ensure that the zones reflect that. I think this is a very self-explanatory notice of motion. I don't think I really should need to plead to councillors to endorse these letters, but I'm happy to hear what other people have to say. And I think that it is something going forward in the future when the zones get done and we ensure that our residents are looked after, and that this is brought to the attention of the relevant people, that it'll be better for everyone, and there will be that clear peace of mind for residents in Avondale Heights that they will not have to catapult their children across the Maribyrnong River. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Serace, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just following on from Councillor Byrne, back in the day, probably about 25, 30 years ago, there was a high school, a secondary school on Military Road, and things change over time. So I suppose demographics of the society, of the ages of children, etc., have re-emerged, where we now have rebirth of younger families. They're growing up and then their children are going to primary schools, but now they're going to need secondary school. So once the high school in Milliara Road closed down, there was not another one built there because at the time there wasn't so much of a need. But now obviously there is a great need. I've lived in Avondale Heights myself for 35 years, so I can understand, and my children went to Catholic schools, so I can understand the need for the public school to be able to be in an area or closer to people who live in Avondale Heights. And that would be probably the Essendon Keilor College in Queen Grove in Keilor East. There's probably not, well, unfortunately, the zoning doesn't provide for people who live in Avondale Heights to be accepted there. They would cater more for people who live around Keilor East and maybe surrounding area of Nidri, or I'm not too sure. I haven't looked at it.
Just, can I clarify that? She hasn't asked for it. Okay.
So I think in support of the motion that Councillor Byrne has put up, I think it's important that this is looked at, because it's really remote for people from Avondale Heights to get to Braybrook or Sunshine. There is a bus. I think they could perhaps get a tram. But I think it's important that with the changes of development and the demographics of the society, that we need to have that provision for the residents around Avondale Heights to perhaps go more locally.
Thank you, Councillor Thrace. Any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Cusack?
It's timely and important, I suppose, that this occur. From where I sit down in Moonee ward, we've got one secondary school and it's full to the gunnels. And the opportunities for young people who are exiting year 6 to go to other schools in reasonable proximity is pretty tight. So you've got Mount Alexander College. We used to have a school, of course, that had 600 people in it, but Jeff Kennett shut it down many moons ago over at the racecourse, and that's created a real problem for us. So we got many students, obviously, young people who are looking to go to Carlton, over to Brunswick. You can't get in with plastic explosives into uni high, and you go to Footscray City, and that's about it otherwise, because you can't go up the road. The next nearest secondary school from Flemington, Ascot Vale, is Strathmore, and you're shot to pieces trying to get in there too. So it's timely that we have this conversation with the Minister about these things, see if there's any potential to ease some of the pain that some people might be experiencing, but also as we move into the discussions with the Education Department about the Flemington Learning Precinct, this sort of thing really needs to be kept in mind as that grows as an option for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next report is notice of motion number 2019-09, immediate halt to the installation of parking metres along the boulevard, Moonee Ponds. So I'd like to call on Councillor Nation to present his notice of motion entitled Immediate Halt to the Installation of Parking Metres Along the Boulevard at Moonee Ponds.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council acknowledges the considerable concerns of local community organisations and community members and resolves not to proceed with the proposal to install parking metres in the Maribyrnong River precinct, including the Boulevard Moonee Ponds.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Marshall? Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And before I do start, I'd like to thank all those community members who have shared their concerns with councillors over the past week. We've been inundated with emails, which goes to show the considerable number of local residents, river users and sporting club members that will be adversely impacted by Council's decision to install parking metres along a section of the boulevard in Moonee Ponds. While I didn't support the implementation of parking metres at any site across our city, this notice of motion specifically highlights the proposed site along the boulevard and why its selection is flawed, unfair on the community groups that use facilities in that area, and in my opinion is inconsistent with the core principles of MV 2040. The rationale for the installation of parking metres is apparently not to raise revenue, as per council reports, but rather change behaviour. So I put this to you. How can you intend to change users' behaviour if you have not done the due diligence to monitor or survey the selected area? Council did not take occupancy studies of this site like it did other sites, nor did it monitor traffic to see if it was local or external. These are basic standards that council uses when we are changing from 1p to 2p down in a side street. Yet we are charging into this radical installation of parking meters without an iota of data about this site. We don't even have data as to if and when this area is under parking stress, nor was this data compiled as part of a local area traffic management study, as other sites' data was. And there was no consultation with user groups, nothing at all. And then on top of that, the whole crux of this paid parking project is apparently not to raise revenue. However, you can see in the officer comments beneath my motion that by not proceeding with this paid parking, council will lose $143,000 of revenue per annum. Now, if you think this is one of 8 sites in our city where council intends to install parking meters, that is a large amount of money to consider it not revenue raising. And on that note, if council does proceed with parking meters at this site, who will be the poor individuals or families contributing this $143,000 to council every year? It will be the volunteer parents running the Marby Park footy canteen on a Sunday morning. It will be the mums and dads supporting their children, staying fit and active, playing footy or cricket. It will be the locals that want to go for a walk around the Maribyrnong River after work. It might be those local families, local individuals supporting a local business and local council facility at the boathouse. No, the boathouse wasn't consulted either. Or maybe those people will choose another option. Maybe the change in behaviour that council so dearly wants will be a behavioural change of just avoiding this area, of not taking on voluntary roles at the local sporting club because they can't keep chipping in to contribute to council coffers. Maybe they'll take their kids to another footy or cricket club, given no other clubs will be as directly impacted as the 2 clubs at this site. Or maybe that behavioural change will be not taking that walk after work, even though council keeps telling you in MV 2040 that we are a healthy and active city. Councillors, those that are here, the decision to install parking meters at this site was done so in haste, without considering the implications to all that use this area. It is not consistent with the rationale of paid parking. It is not consistent with supporting the key themes of MV 2040, and it is going to have an ongoing and adverse impact on the community and sporting clubs that are the backbone of our municipality. So, councillors, I would ask for your support with this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm always happy, I won't say happy, I'm comfortable making difficult decisions if I fear I can properly articulate the rationale and the reasons why that decision has been made. And one of the reasons that I didn't support the paid parking implementation proposal was because I could not justify the implementation of the proposal. As Councillor Nation has indicated, the report set out a rationale based around behavioural change. Now, we have a number of tools that we regularly use to affect behavioural change in our streets, and most of the time they are, as has been indicated, looking at restrictions that can be imposed in particular streets, and that is a way that we frequently affect behavioural change, and it's very effective for the most part. So if that was what this was about, then you think, okay, well, wouldn't you go and introduce parking restrictions in the particular areas? Just go down the usual path that we go down if it's about parking demand and having that turnover. And I think, again, you'd have to think that the answer to that would be yes. So if it's not about affecting behavioural change, what else is it about? And I think, although I strongly disagreed, I respected some of the councillors who in the debate referred to the revenue raising element of the introduction of paid parking. As I said, I don't believe that that should be the case, but I understand that for those councillors that was the rationale. And we're in a situation where we do need to raise revenue, but for me that is not the path that we should be looking at. The thing that is particularly concerning about this site, and I expressed this during the debate on the initial proposal, was the arbitrariness with which sites were selected. And this certainly is probably, of all of the sites that were selected, one that the rationale just doesn't hold up. There are significant numbers of people who will be directly affected by any proposal to introduce paid parking in this precinct. As Councillor Nation has rightly indicated, they are people who are giving up their time. They are people who are doing what we constantly try and encourage people to do, which is to be active, to be out there, to be using our spaces. So surely we should be encouraging, we should probably be paying them to come along and get out there and be active, rather than disincentivising or penalising them for using a space that should be there to be enjoyed and encouraged by all. And I certainly share the concern, and I've had people say to me, well, why have these particular clubs been targeted? Why have these particular organisations been targeted? And again, I could not provide a justification or a rationale for that. So I'm very happy to support the motion, and again, do acknowledge the numbers of people who have contacted us this week in relation to this. If we are going to go down this path, or if councillors want to go... Oh, sorry, Mayor, I'm almost about 5 seconds away from finishing. I think there needs to be some honesty in the discussion, and being really clear about why we're doing things. And if the rationale put forward by a councillor is, you know what, we really need revenue, so this is one avenue in which to raise it, well then as I said, I mightn't agree, but I respect that. But the argument around behavioural change is not one which holds up in the scheme of things, given we currently use other measures to affect behavioural change. So I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Soros.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do support the motion moved by Councillor Nation. Unfortunately, in September last year, when this decision was made by Council, I was not well, so unfortunately I wasn't there for the discussions that took place and the decisions made. I have, however, followed up some information just for my own benefit to be able to have some discussion in the debate. I understand that Philip Boyle and Associates, who were the consultants for this, did not recommend the boulevard in Moonee Ponds as one of those areas to be targeted for paid parking meters. There were benefits though in relation to unclogging bays in activity centres and unclogging bays at council destinations. And I think it's important that when we talk about behavioural patterns and fees, etc., well, we could perhaps use plastic bags in supermarkets as one of those behavioural actions that take place. And as I said earlier in another debate, I've just moved home and I've discovered I've got about 75 plastic bags from the supermarkets because they're always in the boot of my car when I go shopping. Let's not dismiss, though, other parts of the Moonee Valley City Council to implement a trial of paid parking, albeit $1 per hour, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m, and hope that this will not set a precedent for other allocated sites that the council has moved in a previous motion. I've noted through reading through some of that report that in Perth, the fees from the meters are now paying for the free cat bus in the city. So they've been able to reinvest into the community. We could look at reinvesting in multi-level car parking for areas such as Moonee Ponds, Niddrie or North Essendon, where there's a need for multi-level parking or some form of car parking at our shopping precincts. So I do support this particular site of proposed paid parking revenue at the Boulevard Moonee Ponds to be withdrawn from the list that were put forward at the council meeting where it was moved. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Soros. Any other councillor wish to speak to Councillor Byrne?
Mayor, am I allowed to move a formal amendment on a notice of motion?
Yes, this has to go through the standard process to have a seconder.
Yes, maybe. I would like the notice of motion to read as is, but to stop after resolves not to proceed with the proposal to install parking meters. Full stop.
So the formal amendment is proposed to place a full stop at the end of parking meters.
I think that it's worth the debate of this, yes.
So, so Councillor Byrne wishes to put that up as a formal amendment. Do we have a seconder to second? Do we have a councillor who would second that formal amendment? Councillor Marshall? Sorry, Councillor Marshall, you have seconded the original motion, so you can't second the formal amendment. I have a seconder a councillor who can second the formal amendment?
No way.
Can we get confirmation if you're allowed to second a motion, Mayor?
Can seek clarification to determine if the mayor can, while being in the chair, can second a formal amendment.
No, whether it's an amendment or a motion, the chair needs to depart the chair temporarily in order to move or second a motion or an amendment.
So as
you could certainly work through that process. You could certainly work through that process, but the chair would need to step out.
So the chair would need to appoint a temporary chairperson?
That's correct.
How do we leave this up to governance and the mayor?
We could appoint a temporary chairperson.
Not me. I'll want to debate this, so I'm not going to sit in the chair.
I might propose just an adjournment for 5 minutes. Can I propose that for 5 minutes, please? And do I need a move in a second? Can we?
Madam Mayor, I move an adjournment for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. And seconded Councillor Byrne. 5 minute adjournment. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? For the adjournment is Councillor... Sorry, I have to call that again just because I've got Councillor Sorais, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, and against is Councillor Cusack. Okay, so the 5 minute adjournment has been voted up, so we'll just seek to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes whilst we sort this matter out. Thank you. We have just resumed from our 5-minute adjournment, and I am going to appoint the temporary chairperson for this item, Councillor Andrea Serace, who will chair item 11.3 while I vacate.
Is this only for the amendment?
Yes.
Not for the whole item?
The amendment?
Councillor Cusack, just for clarity through the mayor, the appointment of the temporary chair would be for the conduct of the debate and the voting on the amendment, and depending on which way that goes, then we would be then seeking to have the mayor step into the chair role at the next item.
Ms Pope, can I have a point of clarification in regards to a formal amendment? Can it actually delete a portion of the original motion?
The procedure is, and the protocol provides that it mustn't be must not be substantially contrary to the original motion. So to add words to remove words is acceptable under the protocol, so long as they are not substantially contrary.
Madam Mayor, I just want to seek a point of clarification also that you are wishing to vacate the chair, as Councillor Byrne has moved a different motion, but she has not sought a seconder at this point in time.
No, so the temporary chairperson needs to call for a seconder for the formal amendment to be debated.
What's the motion by Councillor Byrne? Councillor Byrne, if I could call upon you to move your motion that you put forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll be making assuming it gets seconded, a formal amendment to Councillor Nation's notice of motion, reading, take notice that at the ordinary meeting of Council to be held on the 26th of March 2019, it is my intention to move that Council acknowledges the considerable concerns of local community organisations and community members and resolves not to proceed with the proposal to install parking meters, full stop.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that. Councillor Serace?
Councillor Sharp has seconded that. Councillor Byrne, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will. This is obviously the formal amendment that we're changing, and I do want to thank Councillor Nation for bringing this into the chamber, or for bringing the Maribyrnong precinct into the chamber. I think that it's fair that we play this out. I, along with every other councillor here, I'm assuming, have received an abundance of emails, and quite honestly, the community are disgraced in our decision to install parking meters. And I think what else they're disgraced in is the fact that we are saying that it is to encourage the movement of cars and to free up car places, and we're charging $1, and the report does say that it is revenue raising. Now, I did vote. I will put my hand up and say that I did vote for the trial of paid parking meters, and the reason why I did that was because I thought $1 nominal fee, it's not there to revenue raise, it is there to get the cars moving, and that's the way I saw it. But clearly, due to the emails that I've received and the questions that have been asked, it is clearly not how the community sees it. I would prefer us as a council, if we are going to put in paid parking meters, to own the decision. If we're going to do it, we should actually do it to raise revenue. We may need to raise revenue at some stage, and that might mean that there are certain places that after community consultation, we do not charge $1, which is going to be the sake of $100,000, which in a $160 million budget is more community angst than it's really worth. I think that we should just cancel this as it is, and have a report back potentially at some stage. But this trial, I don't believe, is going to work. I don't think that there was enough, in hindsight, I don't think there was enough background to it. I don't think that the idea behind it has been conveyed well enough to the community. And I would prefer to stop wasting officers' time now, because if we support this motion for the boulevard, I know that I've received various complaints about Queen's Park, I've received them about Woodlands, I've received them about Treadwell. It's probably only a matter of a time before we go through potential notice of motions for every single one of where the parking meters are. And I think we need to start from scratch. And it is frustrating that it's gotten to this point. But this is where I see, and at the end of the day, we are elected by the community, and we're elected to make hard decisions. There might be hard decisions, but this decision is, I don't think that the original idea of $1 paid parking actually is going to do what it was trying to achieve, which was to change behaviour. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. I guess I concur with Councillor Byrne on a number of points. The issue of parking meters, I guess, has been an issue that we put up last year as a trial, and it was always going to be a trial. I know sometimes messages can get convoluted, especially when we're putting signs up and the community think that it's a decision, like a fait accompli. We're putting them in and they're just going to be in. But I will reiterate that it was always a trial, and I was quite happy to support the trial. But I guess my issue is that we make decisions as a council and as a council group, and there's, every councillor has a right to their opinion and their vote on every single matter. But when we have a decision of council, that decision has to be respected. And I feel that our decisions aren't being respected. Hence, I'm just saying I'm happy to scrap the parking meters, because I can certainly feel that this matter will be raising its ugly head for the next, probably every single month. As Councillor Burns said, it's going to go from one location to the other. And as a councillor group, I guess I get very disheartened when we don't own our decisions, when we make them and then a few months later we change them. And as I said, councillors I don't believe councillors respect the decisions that are made in the chamber. So happy to support this motion, the substantive amendment that Councillor Byrne has put up, and that's my reasoning for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor? Councillor Marshall.
I'm happy to support the formal amendment. And it's good to hear the reasons why councillors are revisiting their decisions. I acknowledge what you're saying, Councillor Sharp, but I think it's also important that we be able to reflect on our decisions when we have additional information. And I don't think it's a sign of weakness changing your mind in the face of new information. I in fact think it's important to be able to reflect and think, as Councillor Byrne has said, that essentially probably the rationale on which you supported the introduction was not a rationale that is now supported by the information that we have. So I think it is better just to knock this on the head, to not proceed at all rather than waste resources, to cause further angst to the community, and let's just move on.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Cusack?
I don't agree. And I think that we've got a really strange set of circumstances going on here. First of all, the parking meters that are proposed to be put out there, yes, they raise revenue. Let's get that on the table. because everything we do raises some sort of revenue, whether it's rates or whatever. It's where the revenue is applied. And what we wanted to do, which was clear in my mind, was apply that revenue to alternative parking options. And the other part of it was to also gather evidence about what behaviour change might occur and how it might occur. What we currently have, and I'm sorry, the Marby Army got itself very well organised, and I appreciate so much of what they're saying. I didn't quite fall for the wild assumptions that Councillor Nation was making in some of his earlier statements about the fact that people will desert the club and all that sort of thing. I went down last night and I looked at all the parking spots from the roundabout, including the small depot car park, right through up to Orford Road. Now there's upward of 200 odd. Now we're taking 55 of those out. If you any day drive in there and park your car at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can do it all day long. And it doesn't matter whether it's footy day or any other thing. You're hogging that spot that might go to a volunteer for the footy club or might be for somebody who wants to go to the shop, down to the boathouse. And I'm only using this as an example. If you've got a parking meter, you might think about how long you're going to actually be there. It's only $1, but you say, well, listen, I'm only going to be here 3 hours. I won't risk getting a ticket. That'll give me time to have a walk around, find my cappuccino, and even play with the kids in the swings and slides or something. But it also means, though, that you can stay there the whole day if you choose. In fact, you could stay there for 16 hours and put in $10 if that's what your interest is in, maybe the fish are biting or something down the river. But I mean, at the end of it all, what we're not doing is making a significant change to what current practice is. Current practice is I go and take my car park for as long as I want and as long as I choose. All we're talking about is you make a choice, you, the driver, make a choice on how long you'll stay there. Because you can stay there all day, yes, if you wish, or you can be there a little bit shorter. And I just don't get that bit. The revenue raising bit is about how we apply that money to activities that create alternatives to using a car to go everywhere in this municipality. We cannot keep putting our head in the sand or whatever ostriches bloody well do, and ignore the fact that we have more cars on the road than ever, that you will not organise places like...
Councillor Cusack, do you need an extension? Thank you.
Places like Queen's Park, Woodlands and down on the boulevard and those other smaller ones are always going to be busy, and they're getting busier, and there are always going to be issues around how they move and where they move to. And it would be smarter for us to get on the front foot. We cannot even attempt to go into a situation where we ask for more money out of government, do any advocacy on these sorts of things, unless we've got some evidence. And we're blowing the opportunity to get evidence. And I know there were a lot of emails, I know there were a lot of people very worried about this, but they haven't been told the full story, have they? They haven't been told that, you're not losing those car parks. You can get a park there and you can stay there for 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever you need. And the reality is that there is plenty of parking down there. You can you can rearrange things, and it's a matter also, obviously, of talking between the clubs and so on like that. And I just don't get it. I really just don't get that. And the issue about places like Woodland and so on, I've had people suggest to me on the emails, why don't you just pave these areas? I mean, quite legitimately saying that, and put your cars there. And therefore we're confronted by what's our green policy? What use are we as a council in making a decision? And I'm prepared to stick by it, and you're walking away. But I respect your decision. Yeah, well, somewhere along the line we don't have any evidence, we'll never know, And all of these people who are community organisation, community members, will always have the same response. They will always say, no parking meters. Even if you give them the most slack, easy, best option. Look, if they get caught in Puckle Street with a pod and it costs them, what, 70 or 80 or 90 bucks for overstaying there 1 hour, they'll all go off. Yeah. But if you've selected to do 3 hours and you come back in 2 hours, 59 minutes, fine. I mean, you can afford that dollar. I'm sure people can afford that dollar to stay there that little bit longer and even give themselves a little bit of flex time. I'm sorry, I just can't possibly agree with this. I think we have to, somewhere along the line, this is an inner suburban council in significant area of Melbourne, and it is getting flooded by cars. Everybody else is in the same game. The medium circle councils, you can't tell me there's not a parking meter in Box Hill, Burundara, Stonington, all of those places. Go to Dandenong, see if you can get a car park without a parking meter. You go he for tiggy, I'll tell you now. And all of those other places are moving down that track. Darebin, find a place without a parking meter. Give me a break.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Nation.
I will, and I'm quite pleased how this has snowballed into what it is. And I think it's important. We did have, I don't know if we still have, a councillor creed that we used to read out at the start of each meeting, which said that we'll make informed decisions taking the community's views into account. And that informed decisions, and I hear Councillor Cusack mentioning evidence, and I hear him saying that people around the Maribyrnong River and through the municipality weren't told the full story. Problem is they weren't told anything, because that in particular Maribyrnong Park or Maribyrnong River location was not supported with any data. We were going to go ahead and spend $50,000 installing parking meters without any data at all. As councillors have cited that the parking spaces are abundant and not even occupied. Now, how does that match our policy, which has the curbside parking hierarchy, which states when we start moving up each tier of parking restrictions? It has not been a process that has been thoroughly thought through, has been supported with evidence, has been clearly communicated to our residents. And you think about how well we do some consultation, and then I had to have a notice of motion come before this council just to tell the local sporting clubs that this was actually occurring. So the communication hasn't existed, the consultation hasn't existed, and the trial was going to be a $50,000 spend on parking meter, on the actual infrastructure, which may have then been abandoned. So I'm very glad at this formal amendment, or whatever we shall call it, and I think if we are going to do things, we need to do them properly. We need to support them with evidence. We need to go through proper consultation. The community has spoken. The community have not been, as Councillor Cusack said, told the whole story, haven't been told any story, and I'll gladly support this abandonment of any parking meters throughout the municipality. So,
I shall now put the vote on the substantive motion from Councillor Byrne. All those in favour? Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Serace and Councillor Cusack. I'll now ask the Mayor, Councillor Sharp, to come back to the chair. And that motion was carried.
Thank you, Councillor Serace. So that amendment is now the substantive motion, and Councillors Nation must... No, it's now the substantive motion, so now we need to vote again because that was a formal amendment. So the formal amendment becomes the substantive motion, and Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Serace and Councillor Byrne have Councillor Byrne, you haven't actually spoken yet. I'll get clarification, because pretty much once the substantive motion becomes the motion, the councillors that have already spoken do not get a chance to speak again. So I can get clarification on that.
So, through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Sorais, no, you didn't speak on the amendment because you were chairing. That part of the process, it's now been voted on, it's been carried, so it's now the substantive. So you can obviously participate in this part of the debate.
Just to clarify that, people, my understanding with the our meeting procedures is, once the formal amendment becomes a substantive motion, those councillors that have already spoken do not get a chance to speak again. No, on the original motion. On the original motion.
The original motion is, sorry, Mayor, just to clarify. So the original
I'm just
motion
going to get
is
clarification
amended, so it's gone in a sense.
But I'm pretty sure our meeting procedures advise for that. I'll just
We're
get
talking to a
clarification.
different motion.
Through you, Madam Mayor, now that it is amended, we recommence the debate. I need to confirm who has actually spoken on the original.
Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sorais.
So there may be
original
other
motion.
councillors who still want to put forward their views before the vote is taken.
Can I just, as a point of clarification, the original motion is gone because it's been amended by a very significant change. So we are debating a new motion, essentially. This is
That is correct.
significantly, yes, so we can all participate because we haven't already had a debate on this particular motion that we are now debating.
I don't believe, I'm happy to be corrected, but I don't believe our meeting procedures allow for that. Ms. Watt, could you please advise?
Through you, Madam Mayor, 9.10 of the meeting protocol says the substantive motion, once the amendment's carried, it becomes a substantive motion and must be put to the vote by the chairperson, but only after councillors who did not speak to the original motion have exercised their right to do so.
Thank you.
Sorry, just as a point of clarification, and I don't know, I almost feel like I'm sick of having this discussion about formal amendments. We now have a motion on the floor which is significantly different, totally in substance, to the original motion that Councillor Nation moved. So we are being deprived our opportunity to debate a motion which is significantly different to the motion that we previously had debate on. So there is either something majorly wrong with the meeting procedure protocols, or there is an interpretation issue, because what you're doing is essentially saying we go through this process, we have a new motion which is totally different to something we've already debated, and then you lose your right to have a debate on the new motion. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Just as clarification, Councillor Marshall, it has happened like this previously when we've had a formal amendment become a substantive motion. I understand the passion or interest around this matter, but the fact is that's how the meeting procedures are written up, and that's what
are wrong, Mayor.
That's what we've done previously, though, Councillor Marshall. This is no different. Hence why I was of the understanding that that's what occurred, because it's what has happened in the past.
So sorry, just to clarify, because we need to be clear about this, what is happening through these meeting procedures, and I'm not having a go at your ruling on it, that's the way you've ruled, but what is happening is councillors are being deprived the right to debate on a motion which is substantially different to the original motion which was amended. If it had been lost, I would agree with that, because we'd be debating the same motion. But this is now a motion which has been amended in a substantial way, and now you're saying that I have no right to debate it.
I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just how the meeting procedures are, and I have a clear intention, a clear guide from the councillors that they wish me to, carry out the meeting procedures to the letter. So, hence, we are carrying on the debate of the original motion, which has become the substantive motion based on the formal amendment. And Councillors Byrne and Councillor Cusack still need to speak to the motion before us.
Point of clarification, Madam Mayor, because I was temporary chair when that amendment was being put forward. Do I get the opportunity to speak to the substantive motion?
No, sorry, Councillor Swace, you have spoken to the original motion. So, Councillor Byrne, would you like to continue your speaking?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So obviously we have a new substantive motion. which is saying that we will not proceed with the proposal to install parking meters anywhere within the municipality. I think we have to remind ourselves that we are elected by the residents of Moonee Valley, and they have told us loud and clear that they do not want parking meters that are going to encourage changed behaviour. We may need to make hard decisions in the future, but if we do, we have to consult and we have to own it. We have to say we are doing this for revenue raising if that is the reason why we're doing it. And I think this is the main issue that I've had with the parking meters, that if we are raising revenue, we should own it, and we weren't. It even says on our Your Say page, is this just a revenue raising exercise? And the answer that is given is parking fees are designed to influence behaviour, not raise revenue, in order to allow for as many people as possible to access centres. Now, this on our Your Say page just seems wrong. So I think that we are doing it to raise revenue, and that's why I feel uncomfortable with it. And I'm glad that this is the substantive motion. I don't know whether it's going to get up yet, but I think all I can say is that I've listened to everyone, the hundreds of emails, and we will go from there. I do want to just pay a bit of respect and note the officers' time that has gone into doing all the work with paid parking. I'm sure they'll be pulling their hair out tomorrow. This is no reflection on them at all. It is obviously just as a council group, we've had new information come to light, and I think that we need to use it before we take that step further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, as a dissenting voice, yeah. Well, you heard a lot of my argument earlier, only a few minutes ago, about why we need parking meters in a parking meter trial, pardon me, in Moonee Valley, and why the wick is burning down on the powder keg very quickly. And unless we actually do something, we're going to be in an awful mess, because all we're doing is continuing to encourage more and more cars into places. Now, I don't often get a second bite at the cherry, so I'm going to have a go here, because Councillor Nation sort of talked about my notion about evidence, and he has a view that all the evidence should be collected in the first place from the residents. Do you want parking meters or not? Do you want the clubs to know, do they want parking meters or not?
Point of clarification, that I was talking about the evidence collected by the traffic engineers, not by residents. I've been under...
Point of clarification.
All right, I'm happy to take that back. Happy to take that back. Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah. However, there is also a basis for collecting evidence in other areas where there are not necessarily tight spots all the time, but there are clear tight spots at particular times. Now, it has been well established by Maribyrnong Football Club and their supporters that it is incredibly busy down there on a Saturday and a Sunday. And it's so hard to get a park. And many people say, geez, I could have been here a bit earlier, but I couldn't find a park. Well, give me strength, Lord. If you're sending people in to park wherever they blasted well feel like, and do it for as long as they feel like, and they were an under-10s game or under-9 or whatever it is, they do the odd numbers these days in the EDFL. If you were in that and you stay and have a natter for the next 3 hours with your mates, of course your car park has all of a sudden ruined the opportunity for under-11s and under-13s to get a place. Whereas you can go in and actually put your few bucks in, as I said before, and make a choice about how long you're going to stay there and get off out of the place. The things that we are lacking in this are information about that sort of informal stuff. We don't have it. And the reality is that how we apply that to a decent common sense approach. Now, yes, it may be that there's installing of equipment and so on like that, but it's not a lost cause because we can use money that's collected to take that away, and that's part of the parking plan, that didn't quite work. But we certainly have within our council parking hierarchy the opportunity ultimately to look at parking meters if they're needed. And in some places they may be needed on a small scale to look at that question of behaviour. We're never going to get the whole plan for that riverside place sorted if we're overrun for the next 20 years by cars. We need to start making it move now.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. So everyone has now spoken on the motion before us, so now I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Serace and Councillor Cusack. So that motion is carried. The next item of business is urgent business. And councillors, do we have any items of urgent business? Does you? Do we have any items of urgent business? No, council, no urgent business. Do we have anything in our roles as delegates? Thank you. No delegate reports. So the next item of business is confidential reports, and there are 4 confidential reports this evening. Councillors, can I have a motion that the meeting be closed to the public under section 89(2)D of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider confidential reports?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Swace. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it, thank you.
Councillor Nation. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So this is where we say goodnight to members of the gallery and those watching from home. Thank you for your interest in tonight's meeting. We must now close to determine some confidential reports, and we trust that we shall see you again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.